Part 63. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Enchenmi San. Chapter 652. Mine Base, Main Tunnel of Shaft Number 4. Asano Akira, who was following the team at the end, suddenly stopped and said, there was a loud noise coming from the distance. A loud noise? Why didn't I hear it? Layton took out his ears in frustration. My ears are original. If something goes wrong, I'll be in big trouble. We didn't hear it either, Kaylan said. Did the fighting start on the front battlefield? Here it comes again, this time louder. As soon as Asano Akira finished speaking, the entire tunnel shook violently. The collapsed cement debris fell from the top of the tunnel and hit everyone's heads and shoulders, making a rustling sound. The sound of rustling. Damn it, there was such a big movement. Did they use ground-penetrating bombs? Or the kind with nuclear warheads? Layton whispered. Isn't this tunnel collapsed by the earthquake? Although it was made of concrete and steel. It has been reinforced, but this is an old project decades ago, and no one has maintained it for so many years. Maybe the steel frames buried in the cement have rusted. If the tunnel collapsed, wouldn't you still be holding it up? Yvonne glanced at him and said, with the abilities of Lucifer and Augustus, they can dig it out even if they are buried, right? That's what I say, but... Okay, the frontal battlefield has begun. In other words, we only have 4 hours left. Kaylan interrupted the conversation between the two people. 200 meters further is the start of the minecart track. The station has started. The members of the Gopher team have repaired and repaved the railway track. We will take the minecart later. As for the thrust of the minecart, I will leave it to you. Understood. Layton nodded solemnly and immediately closed his mouth. Ruins of the ancient Copper City, frontal battlefield. 3 rounds of carpet saturation bombing have been completed. Several meters of rock formations were cut off the ground in the entire bombing area. Smoke and dust rose hundreds of meters into the sky, blocking the sky and the sun. Report, there is no reaction in the bombing zone, the staff officer's voice sounded again. Let the ground troops, no, wait a minute. Terran suddenly leaned down and stared closely at the battlefield wrapped in thick smoke below. He did not put the thermal infrared image on the screen, his eyes did not even. He couldn't penetrate the smoke, and when he looked down from the battleship, he couldn't see anything at all. However, a strong omen could not be dissipated in his mind. There must be something hidden in this area. If this was a sandbox simulation rather than a real battlefield, he would even be willing to bet 1,000 credits with his opponent and then send a reconnaissance force to verify his guess. But he can't do that now. On the sand table, soldiers are just a number that can be increased or decreased at any time, but on the battlefield, behind every number are countless living lives. Although he said that he has never suffered psychological pressure due to the death of soldiers, this does not mean that he is a commander who regards human life as trivial. Terrans has an almost perverted mental misophobia. Under his command, every soldier killed in battle must die a worthy death, and only valuable sacrifices are recognized. As for meaningless death in battle, it is the most intuitive manifestation of the commander's incompetence. Let the ground troops stay where they are and send drone armor troops to the bombing area. Terrans only thought for 2 seconds before issuing a brand new order. Hundreds of special containers were unloaded from the backs of the engineering mechas. The cabinet doors were opened, and nearly 3,000 Black Widow Spider unmanned tactical mechas pulled on their slender metal limbs and poured in from 3 directions. Bombing area. The Black Widow Spider unmanned aerial vehicle is a new generation of military combat drone developed based on the Wolf Spider all-terrain tactical mecha. Compared with the Wolf Spider, the Black Widow Spider cancels the carrying capacity of the Wolf Spider. It has human functions, and has greatly simplified the power mechanism, discarding all armor except the gun mantelet, and the materials of non-force-bearing parts have also been replaced from high-performance alloys to polymers that are cheaper and easier to mass-produce. As for the size of the machine, body has been reduced from the original length of more than 10 meters to less than 2 meters. The original weapons of the Tarantula all-terrain tactical mecha only have an electromagnetic railgun installed on the back. Of course, the railgun also uses a cheap castrated version, with a pitiful shooting life of only 100 years. 50 rounds. Even a layman who is not very familiar with the research and development of weapons and equipment can easily tell that this mass-produced drone is developed as a disposable consumable. However, when the number of these things reaches a certain level, time, it can still play a decisive role on the battlefield. A salvo of thousands of railguns can even sink some light battleships equipped with energy shields. These UUFs can be programmed for group formation command, or they can be controlled individually by ordinary UUFs. At this moment, the person who controls more than 2,000 Black Widow spiders is none other than Trends himself. He opened his arms and slid his fingers slowly and evenly on the touch screen, inducing the groups of UUFs that had been formed in advance to cover each other and alternately go deep into the bombing area, but the 100 who were in the lead were when multiple UUFs entered the center of the bombing zone. The signals of nearly 400 UUFs in the middle of the entire queue suddenly disappeared. Report, Commander. A huge heat source has appeared in the center of the bombing area. The nervous voice of the staff officer rang in Terran's ears. At the same time, the number of UUF signals entering the bombing area was rapidly declining. Originally, the signal on the screen, a large number of densely packed light spots are extinguishing in large areas. Fortunately, you didn't let the ground troops enter the bombing area. The old lieutenant general took a deep breath and said, otherwise, the losses of the drone troops would have to be borne by the soldiers. Terrans had no intention of responding to the old general's sigh. His eyes scanned the dozen or so screens in front of him one by one, and his 10 slender fingers danced on the touch screen like playing a piano, translating strings of brand new command codes written into the original operating program. The drone armor units did not choose to withdraw from the battlefield at the first time. Instead, they gathered a dozen firepower clusters while maintaining high-speed movement. In turn, they surrounded the areas where the light spots were extinguished, and began to move towards the smoke. Blind firing. I need the clearest thermal infrared images possible, Terrans said. The next second, an image composed of colorful blocks was projected on the big screen. Although there is interference from smoke and flames, you can still see that in the center of the image, there are large orange-red blocks representing high heat. The largest one is even more than a kilometer long after scaling. What is this? The old lieutenant general stared at the screen and muttered. Compare it with the data of all known samples in the database immediately, Terrans shouted, and the operations under his hands gradually slowed down, not because his physical strength had reached the limit, but because the bombing area was within. There are less than 100 drones left that he can control. Comparison completed. There are no samples with matching characteristics, the staff officer said. The enemy is a new species that has never been recorded. I knew. Terrans bit the tip of his tongue gently to dispel the fatigue caused by high-intensity operations. If the heretical sect doesn't bring out these ghosts, it won't be called a heretical sect. When the signal from the last Black Widow spider disappeared, the smoke that had been covering the bombing area finally dissipated, and the true face of the huge heat source was finally revealed to everyone. The ground in the entire bombing area had burst and collapsed, and thousands of tentacles emerged from the gaps in the ground. The smallest of these tentacles are several meters thick and hundreds of meters long. The largest one spans the entire bombing area, with a diameter of more than 50 meters. The top and end of the super tentacle are hidden under the ground, but only the length of the section exposed on the ground is already close to 1,500 meters. The surface of these tentacles is covered with bloody pits, which are obviously the results of those ground-penetrating bombs just now, ground-penetrating bombs that are enough to blow ordinary creatures to pieces, and can't even tear open the mucous membrane on the surface of these tentacles. It's a big guy. Terran straightened up and waved his right arm vigorously. The ground troops retreated 15 kilometers. The Air Force fleet used plasma cannons to fire freely, and the target was these tentacles exposed on the ground. Do you think so many tentacles come from the same monster? The old general couldn't help but ask. It's just intuition taking advantage of this free time. Terrans took out an energy drink, pulled out the cork, and drank it in one gulp. Anyway, no matter if it is one person or a group, as long as it stops our army's attack, on the road, it must be eliminated. If it is a single creature, a creature of this size is likely to be a prehistoric species, the old general said with some worry. The prehistoric species are not invincible. You should have read the report on the Leviathan incident, right? Terrans said. I have read it, but according to the content of the report, the Leviathan destroyed by the First Fleet cannot be regarded as a complete Leviathan. Strictly speaking, it is not a resurrected prehistoric species, but a strange insect. It's just a simulated creature attached to the Leviathan skeleton, the old general said. Then the thing in front of you is just a poor imitation made by the heretic sect to imitate the prehistoric species, Terrans said as he zoomed in on the surveillance screen. He saw balls of dazzling plasma in these. The surface of the tentacles exploded, and the high temperature that erupted directly created large areas of vitrified areas, but these tentacles were only burnt black and brittle. When the carbonized tissues on the surface of the tentacles fall off, you can see that the new flesh and blood inside are growing at a numbing speed. The squirming granulations quickly fill the vacancies in the damaged body, even some that have not fallen off on their own. The carbonized layer has also been squeezed open by the granulation growing underneath. Its self-healing speed is so fast that it can even restore all the damage caused by the first round of strikes before the fleet plasma cannon has cooled down and the second round of strikes arrives. The powerful plasma cannon that the Ark fleet was proud of, except for creating a large number of vitrified zones, actually failed to cause any substantial damage to it. Do you think the way these tentacles repair themselves is very similar to some kind of biological weapon that we are very familiar with? Terran said with a straight face and a look of disgust on his face. Seed of corrosion, this thing is actually a seed of corrosion, but, can the seed of corrosion be so big? It has already appeared in front of us. Even if our reason tells us that it is impossible, we have to believe it. Trend sighed lightly, but no matter what, there is at least one good news. For this kind of monster, we are very familiar with it and have corresponding means of handling it. With such a huge volume, it is difficult to locate the core of this erosion seed. But if you want to kill it with a saturation dose of active ammunition, it will probably be an astronomical number. The old general shook his head and said. I have just calculated it. Assuming that the part above the ground is 1/3 of the entire volume, it would require at least 2 billion standard dose units of active ammunition to kill it. Of course, this is just a conservative estimate. I have no doubt that the part above ground is just the tip of the iceberg. 2 billion units, combined with all the active munitions we hold, how many are there? 14.61 million. Terrans immediately reported a number. It's a far cry from that. Then we can only use precision strikes. The old lieutenant general frowned. Let's not talk about how to locate the nuclear. Even the plasma cannon can't cause effective damage to it, so how are we going to tear it apart? How about opening its body and exposing the inner core? P.S. It has been 1.5 years since I finished treatment. Next week, Monday and Tuesday, I will go back to the hospital for my semi-annual bone puncture review. Bone puncture requires hospitalization now because of the epidemic. I am not sure whether I will be able to do it after I move in. You cannot be discharged and go home on the same day. The bone puncture itself can be done in 10 minutes, but because you need to be hospitalized to do this, bed arrangements are more troublesome. You need to make an appointment in advance, and you have to do nucleic acid tests and so on, and then there are a lot of things to do when you leave the hospital. Procedures, so I may take 1 or 2 days off depending on the situation. I hope everyone understands. It has been almost 3 years since I was diagnosed on July 15, 2019. I hope this test will still remain negative. As long as there is no recurrence within 5 years, it can be regarded as clinically cured, and I can use this to brag in the future. Of course, I am also very grateful to you who have been with me until today. I wish you and myself always good health. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 653. Ask the Ronin team to dispatch Terrans ordered. Is it okay to send out the Ronin team so soon? In the original attack plan, they were the decisive force that would not be released into the battlefield until the street fighting stage, asked the veteran Lieutenant General. Plans can never keep up with changes. If we don't solve the obstacles in front of us, we will never be able to penetrate the ruins of the ancient Bronze City, Terrans said. Your Majesty Commander, excuse me, are you sending the entire Ronin team, not to mention the veteran Lieutenant General? Even the staff officer responsible for delivering the order hesitated after hearing this order. In this battle, Terrans didn't have many trump cards in his hand, and this Ronin team was one of those few trump cards. As a result, less than 20 minutes before the battle officially started, this trump card had to be played. Yes, all 4 mobile teams are going out, and the hunting target is the giant erosion seeds underground in areas A20 to B17, Terrans said. But it's still only a feint attack stage. The staff officer said again. If we can't put pressure on the enemies in the ruins of the ancient Bronze City, our current actions can't even be considered a feint attack. Terrans paused and added, after you pass this order, change someone else. Come on, I don't need a staff officer who will question my orders. If this delays the opportunity of fighting, even if you are shot, it will not help. Obey, obey. Not long after, 24 humanoid mechas with extremely strange shapes jumped out from the belly of a transport ship and landed on the hunting target directly below. These 24 are all 4-meter humanoid mechas. Rather than saying that they are mechas, it is more appropriate to say that they are larger power armors. These armors adopt a streamlined design, with slender limbs and torsos. Different from the thick armor and hedgehog-like armaments of conventional mechas, the bodies of these 24 mechas are extremely thin, especially at the waist and abdomen. The position is almost as thick as a normal person's waist. If someone like Maginot, who has a general's belly, were to be a pilot, he might not even be able to squeeze into the cockpit. But compared with this armor that is so thin that it is almost negligible, there are 2 things on these strange mechas that are particularly more. The first more is that there are many thruster nozzles. In addition to the conventional backpack thrusters and solace of the feet, in addition to thrusters and leg thrusters, these mechas can be seen with large and small nozzles almost everywhere. Even under the hat-style helmets on their heads, there are a full circle of propellers tightly arranged. Device spout. The second many means many knives. The mechas of the Ronin team are not equipped with any long-range weapons, and there are no live ammunition guns, laser weapons, or electromagnetic weapons. The extra weapon hanging points are filled with long and short swords, the shortest of which are as long as Japanese knives have similar thicknesses, and the longest one is a long arc-shaped knife with 2 bare blades inserted on both sides of the backpack, which is more than 3 meters long. If Kaylan and the others could see the scene, they would be very surprised to find that the sword style of these mechas is exactly the same as the one in Asano Akira's hand. Not only are the styles similar, but the materials are also the same. They are exactly the same. The blades of these swords are also made of nino alloy. The biggest difference between the two is that the blade of Asano Akira's sword incorporates part of the stalagmite fragments brought back by Kaylan, showing a matte gray-white texture, while the swords equipped with these mechas are all still black nino alloy original color. Before the Ronin team's mecha landed, the tentacles directly below rolled back into the air. Tentacles several meters thick swept towards them with a whistling sound of breaking through the air. Every machine was facing at least one of them. More than 10 tentacles came from different directions. Regardless of size or quantity, the Ronin team was at an absolute disadvantage. Attack! A sharp shout came from the leading machine, and only a swish sound was heard, and the 2 largest long knives were already in the hands of the machine. At the same time, directly below the machine body, more than a dozen tentacles have completed the encirclement trend, waiting for the prey to fall into it, and then crush it into pieces. With the propulsion and maneuverability of the Ronin squadron's aircraft, they can completely increase their height in the air and avoid the attack range of the tentacles. However, they did not do this. The other 23 team members also followed their captain's example and pulled out two long knives, pointing the blades outward, then crossed their arms, and the mechanical joints on the arm armor directly after locking. The nozzles on the machine body turned to one side and started spraying, pushing the entire machine body to spin at high speed in the air like a top. Not only did they not dodge, but they accelerated towards those tentacles. And when the incoming tentacles tried to attack them, the rapidly rotating blade directly smashed all the approaching tentacles into fine pieces of flesh, and the pus and blood spurted out were even driven by the blade to form waterspouts hanging in mid-air. Only at this time can the idiom bloody storm be used without being used as an exaggeration. The tentacles that were cut open by the blade did not heal quickly, but showed signs of necrosis and decay. These swords of the Ronin team are not ordinary cold weapons. In the handles of these swords, there is a storage tank with a built-in freezing device, which contains compressed active cells of flesh-eating worms. When the valve is opened, these active cells flow forward along the pipes inside the blade and are released from dozens of tiny holes on the blade surface that are imperceptible to the naked eye. For corrosive seeds, this sword is like quenched poison. The dose of active cells it releases instantly can achieve the effect of sealing the throat at the sight of blood against ordinary corrosive seeds. However, it is not because they are equipped with this kind of weapon that the Ronin team is regarded as the decisive combat power in the street fighting stage. In addition to the special characteristics of the mecha, every member of the team is an 8th level biochemical modification person. Only this level of transformation can allow their bodies to withstand such a terrifying load. If a non-enhanced person were to pilot this machine, not to mention being able to fully utilize the machine's own performance, the acceleration generated by nearly 100 nozzles all over the body would be enough to tear the pilot's body apart. The 24 Ronins landed on the ground almost unscathed, but the tentacles that attacked them were severely scarred by the rotating long knives. A large amount of toxins invaded these tentacles, causing the erosion. The self-healing speed of the species becomes extremely slow. The corrosive seed hidden deep in the ground obviously has extremely high intelligence. When it discovered that the injured tentacles could not be healed and the deadly toxins might spread along the tentacles to the body, it actually cut off the injured tentacles on its own. The tentacles moved so decisively that even Terrans, who was closely watching the changes in the battle situation, was stunned. "Very special, this guy is very special," Terrans murmured. It is impossible for ordinary erosion seeds, including those SP-type mutants with terrifying destructive power, to take such actions, not because they do not have the courage of a strong man to cut off his wrist, but because they simply cannot resist the active cells of flesh-eating worms. The temptation. For the active cells of flesh-eating worms, the metaphor of toxic is not very appropriate. Veterans of the Field Corps and agents of the Security Bureau have another theory in private. If these corrosive seeds are compared to hopeless addicts, then the active cells of the flesh-eating worms are equivalent to what they are: the drug you crave. Although this thing will kill them, as long as they smell the smell, any corrosive seeds will rush up one after another like crazy, just like moths rushing to the fire. In order to prevent harmonization, I have replaced the name of something with English. If you don't know the meaning, just search it on Baidu. If there are such contraband nouns that may become asterisks in the following content, I will also use it. It will be processed in English or character separated way. I won't explain much later. I don't mean to deliberately make foreign farts. Everyone understands it. Writing a book is not easy, please understand. But now this big guy is able to resist this fatal temptation and take the initiative to cut off his contaminated tentacles. This can only show two possibilities. First, this big guy has as much power as due to human wisdom and strong self-control ability. Secondly, there are humans, or human consciousness, directly controlling its behavior. Trends prefers the second possibility. The Ronin team has entered the battlefield. They all threw away the long knives that were out of ammunition in their hands, drew out new weapons, and frantically slashed at the approaching tentacles while moving around. Whenever the unhealable wounds on a tentacle accumulate to a certain extent, the seed of erosion will actively cut off the tentacle. The first batch of tentacles that emerged from the ground, except for the largest behemoths, outside, nearly half of it has been cleared away, and during this process, more tentacles emerged from the ground. These tentacles are almost endless, and one after another is cut down and another one pops up. In contrast, the swords on the Ronin are decreasing at a speed visible to the naked eye. "We can't delay it any longer, the Ronin squad will be eaten alive," the old lieutenant general said in a deep voice. "It's time to take the next step." "No rush, just wait." Terrans shook his head. "I have calculated the fuel and weapons reserves of the Ronin team, and they can hold on for at least 5 minutes. What they did is not in vain. Every time they cut, they are all truly consuming the power of the seed of corrosion. But you can't use them as disposable consumables," the old lieutenant general said with some urgency. "A Ronin, from human body modification, martial arts and manipulation technology training, to equipment configuration, etc., all the expenses added up are enough to be worth the more than 2,000 Black Widow Spider drones that were just destroyed in the first batch. What's more important is that there are very few candidates who meet the conditions, and only 8 super biochemically modified human beings are enough to screen out 99% of the candidates." The Ronin team was formed 4 years ago and was put into actual combat for the first time. There were only 24 people in total. It's not that the military doesn't want to expand their establishment, it's that they simply can't. Soldiers themselves are a consumable in war. Terran stared at the screen and said without turning his head, "No matter which battlefield they are put on, they will eventually be consumed. As long as they are, they can maximize their own value, and the purpose of forming this team will be achieved." Finally, when the 2 members of the Ronin team who charged the most fiercely lost power due to exhaustion of their body energy and were beaten into discus by the sweeping tentacles, Terrans issued a new order. "Execute Plan No. 74. More than a dozen heavy vehicles slowly drove into the combat area under the protection of armored troops. Taking advantage of the remaining Ronin to contain the tentacles emerging from the ground, these more than a dozen heavy vehicles advanced nearly 100 meters in one breath. After more than 500 meters, they stopped until the ground ahead was severely cracked and there was no way out. A large number of anchors were shot out from the bottom of these heavy-duty vehicles to fix themselves on the ground. Then, the device folded on the back of the vehicle stretched out. It was a large robotic arm at the front end of the robotic arm. It is equipped with a heavy-duty pile driver that uses energy crystals as its energy source. The accompanying engineering mecha inserted the thick metal pile into the ground. Amidst the deafening hammering sound, the entire thick metal pillar was submerged, while the engineering mecha on the side quickly connected the second metal pile to the ground. To the back. According to the Observation Department's report, the main body of the seed of erosion is located at least 200 meters underground. Although this location can be reached with an earth-penetrating bomb, the rock formations that collapse with the explosion will be holes drilled by the earth-penetrating bomb. It is blocked and there is no way to shoot active ammunition through the hole. And Terran's decision was to completely tear down this entire rock formation. It is difficult to achieve this level of bombing by the Air Force fleet alone. He can only let the ground troops venture into the war zone, directly use pile drivers to drill enough and deep shafts above the heads of the erosion seeds, and then use a large number of explosions to materials are thrown into these wells. There is no need to lift off the ground in the entire combat area, as long as one corner can be lifted to expose the body of the seed of corrosion. Every time these pile drivers dig a shaft, the mechas on the side will put more than a dozen crystal energy bombs into it. Relying on the resonance between energy crystals, these bombs can release far more terrifying power than nuclear explosions. P.S. Thank you June for the 1,666 starting coins. Thank you book friend 12102920480532 for the 500 starting coins, thank Museing for the 100 starting coins, and thank you all for your blessings. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Alien Relic Hunter, author, and Chen-Mi-sen. Chapter 654. Like the Ronin team, this force and these equipment are also scheduled to be dispatched after entering the ruins of the ancient Bronze City. Their purpose is to destroy the underground structure of the ruins and paralyze as many of the ruins' own defense facilities as possible. However, due to the emergence of giant erosion seeds, they had to be put into the battlefield early. Although the Ronin squad successfully attracted most of the attacks from the seeds of corrosion at first, as time went by and team members died one after another, the giant seeds of corrosion finally began to focus more on these buried crystals. On the troops capable of bombing, in less than 3 minutes, 4 pile drivers had been destroyed by the tentacles, and the crystal energy bombs buried in the shafts were also detonated. Although these crystal energy bombs exploded with great force, because these crystal energy bombs were not detonated at the same time and failed to trigger a large-scale resonance, the explosion effect was naturally far from the expected target. Send 3 additional engineering troops. In addition, the first batch of armored troops originally scheduled to press forward will directly enter the battlefield to help the engineering troops deflect the tentacle attack, Terrans immediately ordered after seeing this. On the other side, inside the mine tunnel, continuous vibrations continued to come from the direction of the frontal battlefield, one wave after another, just like the high-frequency aftershocks after a major earthquake. Fortunately, the overall seismic resistance of this tunnel is relatively high, and there are no signs of large-scale landslides. Is the frontal battlefield fighting so intense? Layton looked up at the cement slab above his head that was covered with spider web-like cracks and could fall off at any time. Such a high-intensity firefight, I'm a little worried about the effectiveness of their feint attack. I can't last more than 4 hours. It's also possible that the thunder is heavy and the raindrops are light. Yvonne took over the conversation and said, maybe it's just a few fleets taking turns bombing, and the ground troops are still standing still. Even if it's just a long-distance bombing, the energy and ammunition consumption is absolutely staggering. Layton said, I think the officers in charge of logistics at this time are probably so busy that they don't even have time to eat. Probably. Kaylan responded casually, we're here, everyone get in the car. This is the initial site for the minecart track. The tracks in this mine were basically dismantled and recycled. Even if there are no recycled parts, they have already become rusty and unusable after decades of no maintenance. Fortunately, when the Gopher team was digging the tunnel, in order to facilitate the subsequent transportation of troops to the ancient Copper City ruins, a simple steel rail was relayed to the end of the tunnel. Although the track has been relayed, the mine cars left at this site are all old abandoned mine cars. These mine cars are still designed from the old era, because that time coincided with the large-scale mining technology. With the replacement of new generations, all these obsolete mine carts were abandoned here. The recycling of several kilometers of track is a considerable resource, but these mine cars can only be regarded as mosquito legs. The engineers responsible for the aftermath only dismantled the power unit, and these thick and heavy frames were it is classified as industrial waste. But then again, even if the power units of these mine carts are not removed, Kaylan and the others cannot start them. The energy supply method of this model of mine carts is high-voltage electricity transmitted from the rails, and even the rails are covered. Once it was dismantled, the generator set must no longer be in the mine. Layton, check the wheels of the minecart. If it overturns later, it will be your fault, Kaylan said. Okay. It only took less than 3 minutes to repair the wheel hub and replace the scrapped bearings. The two mechas basically took over the work of jacks and cranes, and Layton's robotic arm itself was transformed into various machines by him. The collection of tools makes this job very easy to do. Everyone jumped on the minecart one after another. Using Augustus's propeller as the power source, The minecart sped directly towards the depths of the tunnel. As for the blasphemer Mecha, which was unable to board the minecart due to its size, he followed closely behind the minecart. Kaylan was not worried that Valentina would fall behind. With the blasphemer's engine, she could easily catch up even if the minecart's speed doubled. The only thing that worried them was the distance after leaving the original mine tunnel. The newly dug tunnel by the Gopher team had not had time to be reinforced with concrete and steel frames. If the vibrations from the main battlefield were to intensify, it would be worse. It might actually cause a landslide. Being buried alive in a tunnel is just a trivial matter. After all, there are two high-power machines, so there is no need to worry about not being able to dig out, but if the tunnel is blocked and cannot reach the target location on time, then the problem will be big. There were constant harsh friction sounds between the metal wheels and the rails, dull rumbling sounds echoed in the rock formations in all directions, and rock debris fell from time to time above the head. This feeling was like something in some first-person games. The same escape level. But what is different from the game is that the character controlled by the player wants to escape, while Kaylan and the others are heading towards the deepest part of the tunnel at full speed. Pay attention to your surroundings. According to the intelligence provided by the Field Corps, 5 kilometers further is the location where the second batch of reinforcements lost contact. Everyone in Ian's team said, "The other party is likely to ambush us in the blind spot of the field of vision. Never let down your guard. Don't worry, with the sensitivity of Augustus's sensor, even if there is a bug hidden in a rock crevice 200 meters away, I can find it for you," Layton said, patting his chest. "In my experience, those who rely on high-tech equipment in the ruins and think that they can sit back and relax after spending money to buy new equipment will die miserably in the end," 33 said lukewarmly. "Hey, how can you curse people? Although you are now a member of our god hunting group, based on seniority, you still have to call me senior," Layton shouted, dissatisfied. "Qualifications do not completely represent experience," 33 choked Layton back with one sentence. "I have explored S-level ruins twice and A-level ruins 11 times, 4 of which were land reclamation missions, and 2 were successful. We have entered the core area of the ruins. What about you?" Layton was suddenly speechless. Compared to these top strong men in the hunter circle, he was simply a complete newcomer. Although he and Hound barely reached the threshold of elite hunters, these qualifications were basically obtained through low-level tasks. Before teaming up with Kaylan, the two of them usually only took on exploration missions below B level. They would not even take a look at high-risk missions above B level. Many people would misunderstand the Hound's caution and cherishing life as cowardice and fear of death, but only Layton knew that the Hound was not afraid of death, but rather that after his death, his subordinates who sacrificed their lives on the battlefield but did not receive the treatment they deserved. There is no one to take care of his family members. At least 80% of the rewards for the Hound's mission to explore the ruins were sent to these people. Otherwise, with his income level, he would not be able to even have a drink on weekdays. "You have actually explored so many high-level ruins," Yvonne glanced at 33 in surprise. "As a doctor, he has more opportunities to cooperate with some independent hunters, and has a record in ruin exploration." It's a little better than Layton and the others, but compared with 3031, it's also dwarfed. To an insider, the frequency and intensity of 33's explorations are no different from actively seeking death. A-level ruins are still a wasteland reclamation mission, and the survival rate of the advanced exploration team of 30% is astonishing. And this guy actually completed 4 land reclamation missions alive. As for entering the core area of the ruins, the difficulty and risk are even higher than those of the land reclamation missions. He didn't doubt whether 33 was bragging. Such qualifications were public on the internet and could be found with a casual search. It would be more embarrassing if forced bragging was exposed. What's more, he had no need to brag. Thanks to 33, they have always accepted missions as lone hunters. If they registered a hunting group, his exploration points alone could push the hunting group to the top of the rankings. 10. Do you think I'm committing suicide? 33 suddenly let out a vague laugh. Yes, that's what I thought at first. As long as I die in a corner of a certain ruins here, you don't have to think about many things. At that time, my mind was full of thoughts on how to escape, but in the end, the more you want to die, the harder it is to die, right? Kaylan turned around and interjected. Yeah, maybe my life shouldn't be cut off, 33 sighed. Then are you still thinking about seeking death? Layton couldn't help but ask. To be honest, when Kaylan was selecting people before, you took the initiative to stand up and said you wanted to join the action team. In the eyes of others, you were just like there is no difference between seeking death. I think no one wants a teammate next to them to be a person with self-destructive tendencies, right? Are you worried that I will implicate the whole team? 33 replied, don't worry, I don't want to die anymore, at least for the time being. But you don't have long to live, Zilugo said suddenly, 6 years at most, or less. What's going on? In surprise, Layton even opened the cover of Augustus's cockpit and stared at 33 in astonishment. Could you be, too? Some kind of experimental body modification surgery? While gaining powerful strength, it will cause irreversible damage to the body and even affect lifespan, Kaylan asked tentatively. When talking about this, his first reaction was to think of the disease. Village of Marshall. Marshall relied on telekinesis experiments to gain power beyond the reach of ordinary people, but as a price, after he became a perfect individual, he only had the last 3 months of his life. Even Zilugo couldn't save him. Absolutely. 33 raised his arm and opened his palms. Others suddenly discovered that the nano-alloy flying knives he was accustomed to were suspended in his palms, rotating slowly. Are you also a subject of the telekinesis human experiment? Kaylan asked. What telekinesis human experiment? This time, it was 33 who had a confused look on his face. A secret human body enhancement experiment conducted by the Institute uses some means to amplify the human body's mind power and make it have substantial abilities. Anyway, the team members are all members of the team, and Kaylan has nothing to hide. If you don't know about this experimental project, then what's going on with your ability? Kaylan pointed at the black blade suspended in his palm. This ability comes from the Alpha civilization, 33 said. Did you get it in the ruins? Kaylan was stunned. He immediately thought of what happened after he touched the stone tablet in the glacier ruins. It seems that he also had a similar adventure. Is it something from the S-class ruins? Ivan asked in wonder. Is it something inherited from the Alpha civilization? No, I didn't get it from an S-level ruins, it's not even an A-level ruins. 33 shook his head, it was a B-level ruins. 4 lone hunters and I accidentally triggered a trap. The solace of our feet, the floor below suddenly turned into powder, and the 4 people fell directly from the abyss hundreds of meters high. Then what? Just when we thought we were going to be smashed to pieces, no one expected that there was actually a pool underneath. 33 continued. Pool? Even if it is a pool, if you fall from this height, the tension of the water surface is enough to smash the human body to pieces, right? Ivan asked in confusion. That's what I thought at first, but when I entered the water, I found that the liquid not only did not kill me, but also penetrated into my body along the mouth, nasal cavity, and even pores. 33 frowning slightly, he said, it's hard for me to describe that feeling. Anyway, I already gained this ability after I regained consciousness. He paused and then said, but at the same time, a countdown appeared in my consciousness. Although there is no explanation, I know that when this countdown reaches 0, it will be the end of my life. The girl said, not bad, I have exactly 5 years and 9 months left. Isn't there any way to extend your life? Layton's eyes changed when he looked at 33, didn't Dr. Ivan give you a comprehensive examination? There is nothing wrong with your body at all, look in your current state, it's obviously not a problem to live another 20 or 30 years, how could this be? If I didn't have this ability, I would probably have died in that B-level ruins. 33 waved, and the black blade flew around his palm and returned to his fingers. This kind of my ability is actually very limited, because I can only control things made purely of nano-alloy. Things made purely of nano-alloy. Leighton subconsciously looked at the mecha under him. What about Augustus? Remove all the outer armor and miscellaneous devices, and its skeleton will be 100% made of pure nano-alloy. Can your ability control it? Yes, but it will consume a lot of my physical strength. I will be exhausted in only 10 seconds at most. Then. Leighton wanted to ask something more, but Asano Akira, who was sitting at the front of the car, suddenly stood up, stretched out his hand to hold the scabbard, and said urgently, "There is a high-speed moving object 450 meters ahead." Close. 350 meters. No, only 200 meters left. So fast, Leighton immediately lowered his head and looked at Augustus' screen, but there was only a black and white snowflake on the sensor. At some point, they had crashed into an area with strong electromagnetic interference. Within. "Turn on the searchlight and aim straight ahead," Kaylan shouted, and at the same time, the bloody living armor had torn off his clothes and wrapped his body in it. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chenmi-san. Chapter 655. The moment the searchlight beam lit up, everyone saw a monster with a shape that made one's scalp tingle, clinging to the top wall of the tunnel, quickly approaching the minecar in a strange manner. This monster has countless skinny humanoid arms, but apart from the arms, there are no other organs visible on its body. These arms are intertwined with each other, and some of the slender arms even grow directly from the thick arms. This reminds people of the intricate branches of some woody plants, but based on Ian's experience, he had never seen any plant with branches that were messed up like this. Yes, chaotic. This was the adjective that jumped out of Ian's mind immediately when he saw this monster. This monster gives people an extremely chaotic feeling. Everything about it seems to subvert human beings' understanding of normal creatures. Even monsters like the seed of corrosion are more capable than this thing. Make people accept it? In just the blink of an eye, this chaotic monster was less than 50 meters away from the minecart. "Leighton, break. Zelo, stop him," Kaylan shouted loudly. As soon as he finished speaking, an invisible barrier appeared between the monster and the minecart. Although it was said to be invisible, with the naked eye of a human being, one could still see that the location of this barrier produced a similar effect. The visual effect of space rupture is as if a photo has been cut out with scissors. All the nozzles on Augustus' body instantly turned forward. The two arms of the machine clung to the frame of the minecar, and the feet acting as brakes plowed out two holes more than 10 centimeters deep and nearly 10 meters deep on the rocky ground. The 20-meter-long deep trench suddenly stopped the high-speed minecar. On the contrary, the blasphemer who followed behind just tapped his toes on the ground to offset the inertia of the forward movement. As for the monster crawling against the top of the tunnel, it hit the invisible barrier. The monster's body was shattered almost immediately, but it was not a bloody piece. Its body had split into countless pieces the moment it touched the invisible barrier. A black beetle smaller than a grain of rice. As if the flowing liquid encountered an obstacle, these black beetles scattered directly along the surface of the invisible barrier, and then circled from the edge of the barrier to directly in front of the minecar. Zelo, who still remained expressionless, let out a sigh. She raised her hand and clenched her open palm into a fist. With her movements, the invisible barrier was like a piece of kneaded plastic paper. Suddenly it rolled over and wrapped those black beetles inside. Zelo's clenched fist turned into a clenched fist, and the invisible barrier that was crushed in the air suddenly shrank. Under the squeeze of space, those black beetles were directly crushed into pieces, making a horrifying friction sound. And cracking sounds continued to come from it. Zelo continued to increase his strength, and the invisible barrier further tightened, until the remains of the beetles were crushed into a solid black ball. "Oh my God, What kind of monster is this? Layton came back to his senses at this time and sighed, I think I have seen a lot of monsters, but this is the first time that it looks so weird. See? Don't you think it looks like the flesh bugs we saw in Leviathan? Yvonne whispered, it's just that those flesh bugs simulated the body of Leviathan and the fighter jets of the First Fleet, and these black beetles simulate human limbs. Tisk, then if a mecha is swallowed by these black beetles, can they also imitate a mecha? Layton said, suddenly shaking his head, no, if they can imitate a mecha, the ground drilling machine of the Gopher team must be able to simulate it, those troops who lost contact will most likely die in the hands of this monster. The mimicry ability of the red meat bugs is more advanced than those of these black beetles. Not only can they simulate great beasts and human fighter jets, but they can also perfectly copy technological products such as energy shield generators and crystal engines, and these black beetles, if I guess correctly, can only simulate living organisms. If time were not urgent, I would really like to collect some specimens and go back to study them, Yvonne added. When the solid black ball in mid-air was compressed to the size of a basketball, Luo let go of his hand. The invisible barrier suddenly disappeared, and the solid black ball fell directly and hit the ground. Boom! A dull loud noise echoed in the tunnel. The density of this compacted solid black ball was dozens of times higher than that of a lead ball of the same volume. Just by falling freely from a height of more than 10 meters, the movement caused by it was no less than the shock coming from the distant battlefield. A shallow pit with cracks on the edge appeared directly where the ball landed. Even the rails on the side were affected, and the joints broke directly. It's like a cannonball, Layton commented. Is it solved? 33 asked in a deep voice. There were no outsiders here, and he simply stopped hiding his abilities. More than a dozen black sharp blades were floating around him, looking like he could control magic weapons in the novels about cultivating immortals. Just like the cultivators who fly with swords. No, Luo shook his head, I crushed them into powder, but their life breath has not completely disappeared. As soon as she finished speaking, a rustling sound came from the front, and the next second, the restored black beetles crawled out of the shallow pit created by the black solid ball. Can't you even kill these bugs? Kaylan couldn't help but become more vigilant. Luo's existence was a very important trump card in his hand, or even Wang Jia couldn't help it. Too much. The first time he met this monster, he directly beat Wang Jia out, but even if Luo took action, he still failed to kill these monsters. This is like playing landlords. You start throwing Wang Jia, but find that you can't suppress the opponent's 3. I don't know how to kill them. Luo shook his head slightly, maybe they can be immune to physical attacks. Is your attack method a physical attack? Layton couldn't help but ask, but the black mummy that couldn't even be killed by a nuclear bomb was easily eliminated by you, wasn't it? Pure squeezing is of course a physical attack method, even if you use space control abilities. Luo replied, I didn't kill the black mummy. It died of its own power. I just attacked it. It's just that some restrictions have been adopted. Luo waved her hands again, and the invisible barrier appeared again, stopping the black beetles that were rushing towards the minecar, but all she could do now was just to stop them. It's different. This thing is completely different from the black mummy, Kaylan said in a deep voice. Although the black mummy's body is indestructible, as long as there is a crack in his body, no matter how small the crack is, even if it is so small that even a microscope, even if it is not necessarily observable, the force field that maintains the strength of its body will disappear instantly. Even if there is no external force involved later, its body will disintegrate on its own, but these black beetles, Luo has already crushed them. It turns into powder, but it can still return to its original appearance. Kaylan paused for a moment and continued, I even suspect that the form of this black beetle is the same as the monster made of human limbs just now. As for their original form. Is that legend true? Yvonne suddenly said thoughtfully. What legend? Layton immediately asked, Doctor, if you have any information, Please tell us immediately. Don't be mysterious at this time. That's just a legend. I'm not sure whether it's true or not. Ivan emphasized the word legend again before saying, I also heard about it in a forum for biology enthusiasts. This legend comes from a document engraved on the wall of the Alpha civilization ruins. The documents of the Alpha civilization, Leighton was stunned and subconsciously focused on Kaylan. How did they decipher the documents of other than Alpha civilization? Is it possible that in this world, besides Kaylan and that damn prophet of the heretical sect? Besides, is there anyone who can understand Alpha civilization's words? They were not able to decipher the textual content of that document, but that document is an extremely rare document with illustrations in the Alpha civilization. The meaning of Ivan's words could not be more obvious. He cannot understand the words, I can still roughly understand the pictures. Do you have any video or photo information? The person who asked this time was 33. No, Ivan shook his head. According to the guy who spread the news, the ruins were taken over by people from the Institute soon after, and all exploration records and things related to them were taken over by the Institute. It has been sealed, and the hunters who have explored the ruins have also been asked to sign a confidentiality agreement. Not only that, even the account that broke the news was quickly cancelled. It sounds very much like a conspiracy, 33 said. If it is just a legend, I have reservations about the authenticity of this legend. Hey, having said all that, what is the content of the legend? Leighton patted the cockpit cover speechlessly. Two of you, do you think this is the time for small talk? Sorry, Ivan also realized this and said immediately, the content of the literature and the discussion on the forum are too professional. Even if you are all biologists, it will be difficult for me to explain it clearly to you in a while, but the most critical point is that, according to the contents of the literature, the Alpha civilization has probably created molecular-level artificial organisms. Molecular-level artificial creatures. Leighton, who looked confused, was obviously not the biologist in Ivan's words. As a mechanical enthusiast, he seemed to lack even the most basic biological knowledge. What do you mean? As we all know, apart from viruses, the smallest organisms are bacteria, but no matter how small the bacteria are, they at least have the structure of a single cell, and molecular-level organisms, whose volume is equal to the diameter of a single molecule, serve as the basic particles that make up matter. First, everything around us, including ourselves, is made of molecules. In other words, molecular-level organisms can basically simulate any form. I can almost understand. Leighton nodded with some confusion. Isn't what you are talking about nanorobots? Theoretically speaking, nanorobots can also be composed of any kind of machinery, just because of the structural strength. And considering the cost, no one would do that. But the biggest difference between living things and nanorobots is that Ivan said, staring closely at the black beetles crawling on the invisible barriers, living things have the ability to reproduce. Machines also have the ability to reproduce, Leighton said with some dissatisfaction. As long as the AI's intelligence reaches a certain level, it can build its own factories, collect its own resources and replicate itself. I'm afraid these things you are talking about are not part of the Omnic crisis. Kaylan interrupted Leighton's retort. Let's not discuss this now. Our first task is to deal with these bugs. Just let Zelo wrap them into a ball again, and then throw them away from a distance, Leighton said. If it catches up, just repeat it again. What if there are many such monsters ahead? Kaylan asked. What if their number is large enough to block both ends of the passage? Leighton was speechless for a moment. Even if they are really molecular-level creatures, they are not impossible to kill, Ivan muttered. Pure physical means may not work, but high temperature or radiation may not. By the way, isn't Valentina's Lucifer equipped with this plasma cannon? Try using this, Leighton suggested. P.S. Disclaimer, it's a cliché. Any plot involving scientific knowledge in this novel is the author's own imagination, or maybe a slap on the butt. it must not be compared with anything in the real world. Take your seat, and never talk about any scientific or pseudoscientific theories mentioned in this book except in the comment area and book club groups. Any similarity is purely coincidental. The author is a scumbag and a believer in the power of my thinking. His brain structure is very green. Everything on the technical level is written by I can do it. If there are any flaws, please ignore them. If there are any, please point out any major bugs or unreasonable things in the comment area or in the description of this chapter, and I will make corrections in time, but if the chapter is released more than 7 days, it cannot be corrected. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 656. Plasma Cannon. Ivan showed a trace of hesitation on his face. If we use it in such a narrow space, we will all be evaporated by the heat released by the plasma, right? I think this can work, Layton said. Let Azza gather those insects together, and Lucifer uses the minimum power plasma cannon to carry out precise strikes. As for the residual heat that escapes, Augustus, the energy shield should be able to absorb it all. Just do what Laule said. Kaylan made a decision. Ze-Logo repeated his old trick, gathering the scattered black beetles together again with invisible barriers, and then crushed them into a solid black ball. Layton controlled Augustus to stand in front of everyone, and the energy shield was deployed at full power, covering the entire minecart. A simple-looking, jet-black gun barrel stretched out from the head of the blasphemer mecha and aimed at the solid ball suspended in mid-air. The plasma-charged cannon is ready to fire, Valentina said. Fire directly. As soon as Kaylan finished speaking, a ball of blazing white plasma was spat out from the muzzle. The flying speed of the plasma did not seem to be very fast, but in an instant it was sticky to the black ball. Together, an indescribable burning smell spread along with a terrifying heat wave, and even the rock wall of this section of the tunnel was melted into red magma and flowed down. Although Augustus' energy shield has absorbed most of the thermal radiation in this direction, the residual heat escaping through the shield is still terrifying. Ivan, 33, and Asano Akira, the faces of those who were not wearing heat-insulating protective gear, were burned red, and the ends of their hair curled up under the high temperature, emitting a unique smell of burned proteins. As for the metal frame of the minecart, it has been hot enough to be used directly as a teppanyaki cooking utensil. Fortunately, the soles of the boots under everyone's feet are made of special rubber and have not been melted by the high temperature yet. The energy of the plasma was released for more than 10 seconds before it was exhausted. Even though this was already the minimum power of the plasma-charged cannon, the surrounding rock formation still showed vitrification. Augustus' energy, the shield, was also directly scrapped due to severe overload. Fortunately, this machine body is also equipped with 2 spare shield generators, so the impact of scrapping one will not be too great. Kaylan and Ze-Logo had their own ways to protect themselves and were not harmed. Naturally, Valentina and Layton, sitting in the cockpit of the mecha, were also unscathed, but Asano Akira and the other 3 were in a worse situation. Not only was part of the exposed skin burned, but the hair on his head was burned completely, and 3 shining bald heads suddenly appeared in the crowd. While Ivan was treating the burns of the 3 people, Kaylan stepped forward and looked at the residue in the glass pit. The original black solid ball now only had some powdery ash left. Kaylan just walked away. After taking a few steps closer, a blast of hot air hit my face. Even though it was just some ashes, the temperature remaining inside these ashes was still as high as thousands of degrees. The signs of life in these things have completely disappeared. Ze-Logo followed and said to Kaylan, "They are completely dead." Yeah, Kaylan nodded and turned back to the minecart. Although the minecart itself was not seriously injured under the protection of the energy shield, the rails on the ground had long since melted into molten steel and mixed with the glassy tunnel section. Kaylan thought for a while and simply let the blasphemer mecha carry the minecart forward. Anyway, with the power of this thing, even if a few tons of load are added, the speed will not be affected at all. Compared with before, the team's advancement speed was actually much faster. Many times, Valentina even had to stop and wait for Leighton and Augustus, who were lagging behind. "Damn it, what kind of engine does this thing use?" Leighton's complaint came from the team channel. "It doesn't matter if it's fast, the agility and braking performance are beyond Augustus." There was a sour taste in his words. Originally, Leighton was still happy to be Augustus' pilot, but in comparison, he suddenly felt that the so-called high-end customized machine he was driving was not enough. "It smells good." It's still the old saying, people will die when comparing with others, but goods will be thrown away when comparing goods. The technology of Alpha civilization is of course incomparable. Although the materials and equipment used by Augustus are no worse than or worse than this Lucifer, the core technology still uses the frame of the human mecha. Just like in a race, you don't lose at the starting line, but people are waiting for you at the finish line from the beginning, Kaylan said. That's right. Even if Augustus has the same performance and does not have a control system directly connected to the human body's nerves, it will be difficult to control it with human reaction capabilities, just like the 30-degree corner just now. If it were operated by my hand, I'm afraid it would have crashed directly into it. Leighton sighed. By the way, isn't the model of this thing called Fallen Angel Unit Number 1, Lucifer? Then do you think the Ark can do it? Is there more than one fallen angel? Since there is Unit 1, there might be Unit 2, Unit 3, or something. After Leighton said this, Kaylan also fell into thinking. Obviously, for the Alpha civilization, the blasphemer mecha is just a mass-produced weapon. There are currently 2 known blasphemers. One was abandoned by him in the abyss of the bottomless sinkhole, and the other was delivered to Valentina's hands by the undead crew. And judging from the name Unit Number 1 given to it by the undead crew, they might actually have several blasphemer mechas hidden away. Kaylan has always known that the Immortal Crew Association has a strong family background. Even if they now pull out a combat formation composed entirely of blasphemer mechas, he will not be surprised at all. The only thing he cared about was the annihilation bomb carried on the first blasphemer mecha. Of course, the blasphemer mecha he abandoned was not armed. Not to mention the annihilation bomb, even the basic heavy armor-piercing sword and plasma-charged artillery had been removed. The weapons that Lan could see were all simulated through the so-called trial program. Although it was a simulation, it directly proved that this weapon has the ability to carry and deliver annihilation bombs of. Judging from the task description of the trial program, the power of that thing is probably even higher than that of the death ray cannon. One annihilation bomb is enough to destroy a creature like the Crown of Ashes that is comparable to the prehistoric species. But originally the Alpha civilization hunted Leviathan, but it continued to bombard it with more than a dozen death ray cannons for nearly a minute before killing it. No, it was more than 1 minute. The video Kaylan saw at that time was in fast forward, and 1 minute in it was equivalent to a week at the normal time flow rate. Annihilation bombs, even if they are not classified as Annihilation Star weapons, are still close to the threshold of Annihilation Star. If the undead crew really had this thing, perhaps with just one shot, the ruins of the ancient Copper City could be razed to the ground. Just as Kaylan was thinking about these things, a vibration stronger than any before came over. The entire tunnel began to shake violently with the rock formations. Exaggerated cracks instantly covered the cave wall, and large chunks of piece of broken rock fell down and instantly buried Augustus, who was following behind. Valentina's blasphemer mecha pushed forward nearly 100 meters against the falling rocks, but was eventually blocked by the completely collapsed tunnel. What's going on? Leighton's communication came from the earphones mixed with the sound of electricity. This vibration is simply more exaggerated than the one in the molten mine area. That time that Leighton mentioned was naturally referring to the massive earthquake in the molten mining area caused by Yagonactor falling from high altitude into the magma pool. That earthquake almost destroyed the surface of the entire mining area. The mining bases in the mining area also suffered. According to the sensor, the direction of the earthquake source is the same as the previous height, and it came from the front battlefield of the ancient Copper City ruins, Valentina said while controlling the blasphemer mecha to dig in the rubble. This movement, are they really feigning an attack? Leighton shouted, did they really throw a big Ivan towards the Bronze City? Is there a hydrogen bomb of Ivan's level on the Ark? Ivan couldn't help but ask. According to official public information, there should be none. The only thing that can reach that level of magnitude is the Ark's own power source. Bundle those dozens of main reactors and thousands of secondary reactors together, it should be able to reach the power of the Big Ivan's original explosion, Leighton said, but who knows if the people above will secretly build a few Big Ivans without telling the people, although this kind of thing is not only used to deal with except for the prehistoric creatures, they are of no use on Alpha Planet. Damn it, I even wonder if there are really a few Big Ivans stored in a secret weapons arsenal in the Ark. But if we use Big Ivan on the frontal battlefield, our own troops will also be affected by the nuclear explosion, right? 33 took over the words, unless all those hundreds of thousands of people retreated to the south of the White Ridge Mountains, we would have to. Otherwise, if one Big Ivan goes down, the main force of the field force will probably be wiped out. Then what else besides Big Ivan can have such exaggerated power? Leighton said as he dug the tunnel and joined Kaylan and the others. Wait a minute, I remembered something. Thing. What? 33 and Ivan asked in unison. Crystal energy bomb, Leighton said loudly, it must be this thing. Only this thing can increase the power to the limit while accurately controlling the explosion range. Kaylan, do you remember Yago? Are those crystallized lava beetles in the Nakatower power room? Those things are actually equivalent to small crystal energy bombs. One or two of these things are not very powerful, but if hundreds or thousands of crystal energy bombs are stacked together, the resonance caused can even surpass the power of Big Ivan's instant burst. They all used crystal energy bombs. Could it be that they have already invaded the ruins of the ancient Bronze City? Ivan stretched out his hand and subconsciously touched the hair that no longer existed on his head, or should I say, they started. We encountered extremely strong resistance and had to play such a trump card. Leighton, can you contact the main force? Kaylan asked. If the progress of the main force's feint attack cannot be controlled, then Ian's infiltration operations will become very dangerous. If they cannot advance simultaneously with the frontal battlefield, the special operations team will become a lonely force. They will face all the enemies in the entire ruins. We can't contact you at all. The interference is too strong, Leighton said angrily. The signal was originally very weak. Now, coupled with the interference caused by the explosion of the crystal energy bomb, the communication is completely interrupted. I can only force it now. Maintain communication with the troops at the mining base. Ask them, can they contact the front battlefield? I just asked. They said that the communication between the frontal battlefield and the mining base was interrupted 2 minutes ago. However, judging from the last communication, the frontal troops may not have been able to get close to the ruins of the ancient Bronze City. Leighton accelerated. Speak faster. It is said that the main force encountered huge obstacles during the attack. There was an extremely large erosion seed buried under the plain in front of the ancient Copper City ruins. They were locked in a bitter battle with this erosion seed. The propulsion speed is almost zero. So it seems that the movement just now was in response to that giant erosion seed, 33 said. Even the prehistoric species cannot withstand an explosion of this magnitude. It's hard to say. Kaylan shook his head and continued to ask, Laule, how long will it take for the communication to be restored? A conservative estimate of 10 to 15 minutes, I can't say for sure, because the application of such a large-scale crystal energy bomb has never appeared in either simulation experiments or actual combat. How long the interference will last is difficult to solve through linear calculated using the formula. Leighton said with some difficulty, it's not impossible even if it lasts for half an hour. Then let's slow down the advance first. The tunnel just happened to collapse. Just maintain the current excavation efficiency, Kaylan said. Wait until the communication with the main force is restored, and then decide on the next action plan. North of the White Ridge Mountains, frontal battlefield. Almost the entire rock formation hundreds of meters thick was lifted open, revealing the flesh-like body of the eroded species beneath the ground. Countless squirming tentacles were entangled with each other, and the wounds torn apart by the crystal energy bombs on the tentacles' surfaces bite and melted with each other. Dozens of slightly smaller tentacles merged into one giant tentacle with an astonishing size in a short time. Immediately afterwards, the giant tentacles also began to merge, until finally, there were only less than 20 of the hundreds of thousands of tentacles left on this corrosive species, but the length of each of these 20 tentacles is enough to wrap around the main peak of the White Ridge Mountains. One of these tentacles suddenly raised high, and then fiercely pulled it down towards the armored troops assembled 10 kilometers away. In the eyes of these soldiers, the sky suddenly darkened, and an indescribable sense of fear suddenly arose, but the fear had not yet completely taken over their minds, and they did not even have time to see the huge black shadow clearly. What? Death came first from directly above the head. This tentacle was like a toppling mountain, instantly smashing these soldiers and thousands of armored vehicles to pieces. There is no way for them to avoid this attack range. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen San. Chapter 657. The 9th Armored Division was completely wiped out. The 10th Armored Division suffered heavy losses. The Special Engineering Force was completely wiped out. Preliminary estimates of the number of casualties are more than 8,000. Brigadier General Aliyev, the commander of the 9th Armored Division, was also killed. Let all troops retreat 15, no, retreat 20 kilometers, Terrans hissed. Immediately ask the Information Department to establish a data model of the target and calculate the maximum attack range of the target. In addition, let the Air Force Fleet also increase the altitude and keep a safe distance of more than 10,000 meters from the target. The fusion tentacles of the giant erosion seed stretch out to a length of more than 10 kilometers, which means that it can even use its tentacles to attack battleships at an altitude of 10,000 meters. Of course, Terrans knew clearly that letting the troops retreat now would be equivalent to giving the initiative to the heretic section. But if he didn't do this, I'm afraid the entire main force would be destroyed by the attack of the fusion tentacles. He never expected that the heretical sect did not even use the defense facilities of the ancient Copper City ruins. It only relied on a giant erosion seed to stop the army's attack and inflict a heavy blow to the field army. Counting the troops that had previously broken into the combat area to attract the tentacles, less than an hour after the war started, the number of casualties had exceeded 10,000. You must know that in the past 5 years, the total number of casualties in the field corps combined, nor did it reach 5 figures. Terrans clenched his fists, and the next second he realized that his palms were filled with sweat. This was going to be a hard fight. Although he had been mentally prepared from the beginning, the difficulty of the fight it still greatly exceeded his expectations. Even in the first few years after the Ark landed on Alpha Planet, the classic battle cases that were included in the military school textbooks, there was no case where tens of thousands of people were lost in the first hour of the battle. Not to mention whether they can win miserably. Terrans looked at the overall situation on the battlefield, and he couldn't even see a glimmer of hope of victory. Those who voted against, Terrans glanced at the old lieutenant general next to him without trace. Maybe they were right. This is an unwinnable war, a must not do. No matter how hard they try, they can't achieve it. But he is a soldier, and soldiers can only obey orders. He can order the troops to retreat 20 kilometers, but he cannot make them withdraw to the Ark and the base. It is true that he is the commander, but he does not have the power to end this battle. Terrans didn't have time to find a tissue. He directly pulled up a corner of his cloak to dry his sweaty palms, and then put his hands on the touch screen again. Let the heavy artillery force and the Second Fleet stay and use firepower to contain the giant erosion seeds. The remaining troops are divided into left and right wings, bypassing the battlefield directly in front, and rendezvousing with the 20th and 27th Infantry Divisions. He rarely used gamble to direct battles, but this time, he had to gamble. If the heretical sect focuses its defense on the front of the ruins of the ancient bronze city, and only sets up a small number of blocking troops or no combat forces in other directions outside the city, then it will be considered a win, otherwise it will be a full bet. All lose. Terrans hated the feeling of betting on uncertain events, but now he could only do this. Time was so tight that they didn't even have the chance to conduct early reconnaissance, even if it was a surprise attack. Doing so was definitely a taboo for military strategists. Why are the undead crew so anxious to launch an attack on the ruins of the ancient Copper City? A question flashed through Terran's heart, but it was immediately thrown out of his mind. He was just a soldier, he only needs to obey the orders and direct the battle. Other things are not something he needs to consider. Even if this is a battle destined to fail. Cannonballs, missiles, lasers, and plasma kept falling on the giant erosion seed. However, compared to its huge size, the trauma these attacks could cause was too insignificant, not to mention that it would only take a few minutes. The limbs torn apart by the shrapnel will heal, and the tissue burned black by the plasma will fall off on its own and return to its original state. The new limbs not only do not become weak, but also grow layers of scaly proliferative tissue. The originally injured area was tightly protected. This giant erosion seed, it is evolving during the battle, and any trauma will trigger the adaptive adjustment of its body. If the battle continues like this, it will only become stronger and stronger. To use that old saying that seems a bit vulgar, it is, whatever doesn't kill it makes it stronger. Terrans quickly realized this problem and called off the attack of the heavy artillery force and the Second Fleet. For the first time since he graduated from the military academy with perfect grades and immediately joined the Field Corps, he regretted his command and operation. If he hadn't used a crystal energy bomb to lift the surface of the ground just now, maybe he wouldn't have done so. If the giant erosion seed undergoes such obvious changes, those fusion tentacles will not appear, and the 9th Armored Division will not be completely annihilated at this point in time. At the cost of losing the entire Ronin squad and more than 1,000 soldiers killed in battle, the result was that the enemy became stronger. This exchange was unacceptable to him. "Aren't you going to invest in active ammunition for suppression?" the old lieutenant general asked. Judging from the previous attack by the Ronin team, the active cells of the flesh-eating worm have a very obvious restraint effect on this monster. Although it is very strong, it is still a mutant species of the corrosion seed, and has the weaknesses common to the corrosion seed. No, Terrans flatly refused. We can no longer waste precious resources on meaningless battles. If the troops can break into the ruins of the Bronze City from both wings, they will directly face the enemies of the heretical section. I can't let them fight unkillable monsters with conventional weapons. Then if this giant erosion seed starts to move, then wait until it starts to move. Terrans gritted his teeth and said, "I hope it rushes towards my command post now. As long as it can lure this monster away, even if I use myself as bait does not matter. Transfer the command of all remaining drone units to me." The heavy artillery unit and the Second Fleet withdraw from the frontal battlefield and turn to support the friendly forces on both wings. He issued a new order. In this way, only the headquarters and the guards directly under the headquarters are left on the frontal battlefield. The old lieutenant general said, "It is too dangerous to do this. You should get out of here quickly." Terrans took off his windy cloak and general uniform, walked quickly to the wall, and took out the combat uniform and helmet hanging in the equipment cabinet. "Also, if I was killed in battle, please transfer the command directly to the hands of the undead crew. I think they must be watching this battlefield closely at this time." "Are you really going to use yourself as bait?" the old lieutenant general said anxiously. "No, doing this is against the regulations. You have a more important command task, and if you die in battle, the army will instantly fall into chaos." Then if the giant erosion seeds retreat towards the ruins of the ancient copper city, do you think we still have a chance to invade the ruins? Terrans retorted, without the commander, at least the combat power of the large army can be retained. If I lose them, what's the use of me as a polished commander? The giant erosion seed obviously has a high IQ. I even suspect that it is directly controlled by people from the heretical section. Terrans continued, if they knew that this battleship was the commander's flagship, they would definitely prioritize me as a target, so. Before Terrans finished speaking, the veteran lieutenant general had already taken the helmet from his hand and put it on his head. The army cannot be without a commander. If you want to set up a decoy, I can be the one to do it. The old lieutenant general suddenly straightened his back. Only then did Terrans realize that this old general, who was originally a bit rickety, the height is actually nearly 1.85 meters. When standing completely upright, he is less than half a head taller than himself. The escape boat has been arranged for you, and the backup command and communication system has been moved there. The old lieutenant general looked at Terrans steadily. You are the one who should leave. But stop talking nonsense, this is not your style, the old lieutenant general said. It is never old people like me who create a new era. Our final value is to become a stepping stone for young people, to hold them up and let them to climb to higher places. I don't know if this battle can be won. If you don't even have a chance of winning, then there's even less hope if someone else takes charge. I understand. Terrans bit the tip of his tongue and nodded vigorously. Ha, I didn't expect that this dead firewood of mine could burn again at the last moment. The old lieutenant general suddenly smiled at Terrans and closed the visor of his helmet. Hundreds of kilometers away from the battlefield, Kaylan and the others were still moving forward in the collapsed tunnel, relying on the strong power of the blasphemer Mecha. The rubble blocking the tunnel did not become an obstacle. They and the ruins of the ancient bronze city, the distance between them is also shrinking little by little. Under the rocks directly in front, it seems that human bones are pressed. Valentina's voice rang in the team's communication channel. Kaylan immediately signaled her to stop, and then Kaylan jumped directly from the minecar. He came out and walked to the place where the bones were found. This is indeed a human skeleton. Judging from the equipment and uniform fragments scattered around the deceased, it should be a member of the elite support team sent into the tunnel to perform search and rescue missions after the Gopher team lost contact. Calculating time, it has only been a few hours since his death, and the white bones in front of him look like someone who has been dead for several years. Even the soft tissue between the bones has been eaten away. According to the natural decomposition rate of the corpse, it will take at least 1 to 2 years for microorganisms to decompose all these things, and it must be in an environment suitable for the growth of microorganisms. These people were killed by those black beetles, right? Layton drove Augustus up. It feels like they were attacked by army ants. There is no flesh and blood left. Yes, Kaylan nodded, probably. By the way, have you contacted the main force? The interference on the frontal battlefield is still very strong, but the people at the mining base said they successfully made contact with the 15th Division, Layton said. Isn't the 15th Division a unit placed on the frontal battlefield? Kaylan recalled the assembly diagram that he had glanced at before. Since the mining base has successfully contacted the 15th Division, it means that they have left. Return to the original position. Yes, Layton nodded. According to the liaison officer of the 15th Division, they are performing a roundabout mission, changing from attacking the ruins from the front to moving to the two wings. Split the troops? No. It's not like splitting the troops. It's impossible to turn the troops to the two wings on the frontal battlefield when the battle is tight. That can only mean one thing. The commander of the main force has probably given up on the frontal battlefield. Kaylan analyzed immediately. Abandon the frontal battlefield? No way, Layton exclaimed. Can't hundreds of thousands of people kill a corrosive seed? Leviathan successfully conquered it with just a fleet, but now it's in the hands of that commander. We have at least the main force of 3 fleets in our hands. Can't we defeat them all? The two cannot be compared. Seed of corrosion, if there is not enough restraint, it can multiply and regenerate infinitely, Ivan said. Even if the commander lets all the main warships of the three fleets crash into it, the erosion seed can still recover as before in a very short period of time. Only the active cells of the flesh-eating worms, or those special stones brought back by Kaylan, can kill this creature. As Ivan spoke, he subconsciously touched the grooves on his mechanical prosthetic limbs embedded with stalagmite fragments. Whether it is the active cells of carnivorous worms or stalagmite fragments from seafloor caves, these things are like water to fire to erosion seeds, although in most people's perception, water can be used to put out fires, but when the gap between the two reaches a certain level, the so-called restraint relationship doesn't make much sense. This is where the idiom "a drop in the bucket can make a difference" comes from. I feel that our advancement speed can be slowed down a little. 33 interjected. If the main force chooses to take a detour, it will take at least several hours to organize another attack on the ruins of the ancient bronze city. P.S. Thanks to the book Friend, do I understand the truth for the 5,000 starting coins for the reward. Thanks to Wang Bukwan for the 100 starting coins for the reward. P.P.S. Thank you all for your concern and blessings. The results of the bone biopsy report came out today after half a year. The MRD, microresidual disease, is still negative. It has been a full year and a half since the treatment. In addition to my weak immunity and weak physical strength, other than that, everything is fine with me. Alien Relic Hunter, author, and Chen-Mi Sen. Chapter 658. 25 kilometers east of the ancient Bronze City ruins. It is now 14:37 in the afternoon. Nearly 2.5 hours have passed since the battle started. There are about 4,000 remnants of the 10th Armored Division that survived the fusion tentacle attack. The wounded among them have been taken to the rear of the battlefield by transport ships of the three fleets for treatment, and the remaining more than 1,000 combat-effective personnel have been taken to the rear of the battlefield for treatment. It was incorporated into the left-wing corps that was detoring to the east. At this distance, the soldiers of the 10th Armored Division could even see with the naked eye the outline of the buildings outside the ruins of the Bronze City. As a military fortress, the ruins of the ancient Bronze City are naturally surrounded by a high granite wall similar to a city wall. However, compared to the inner city buildings made of copper alloy, the material durability of this high granite wall is lower. It's much worse. Today, only the ruins of this ring of high walls are less than 1/10 of the original length. From a distance, only a dozen severely weathered rock pillars still stand scattered on the plain outside the ruins, just like the common stone forests in karst landforms. The left-wing army advanced to this position without encountering any blockage or resistance from the heretical sects. Compared with the brutality of the frontal battlefield, the calmness here can't help but make the soldiers suspicious. A small number of soldiers even began to doubt everything they just saw, including the terrifying monster buried deep underground. It's just my own fantasy. Of course, the soldiers of the 10th Armored Division would certainly not have such thoughts. Many of them had their combat uniforms soaked in the blood of their comrades, and the blood dried and hardened and stuck to the tough fabric, exuding an odor. The strong fishy smell reminded these soldiers who had just passed through the gate of hell, but even so, they still had a strong sense of unreality to the scene in front of them. The ruins of the ancient copper city 25 kilometers away, seems to be an empty city. The distance of 25 kilometers cannot be said to be close at hand, but for modern weapons, even squad-level equipment has several types that can attack targets at this distance, not to mention the various tanks of the armored forces, mechas and self-propelled artillery. With the technological power of Alpha civilization, it should not be difficult for the fortress defense facilities to attack enemies 25 kilometers away. However, the ruins of the ancient Bronze City did not take any offensive measures against the arc field army that was attacking the city. Contact the Air Force fleet above your head. They must be able to see better than us in the sky. An officer waved to the communications team, asked them if they saw anything inside the ruins. Within half a minute, the communications soldier immediately replied, They said that no traces of the heretical sect were found inside the ruins. The whole city seems to be really an empty city. This is impossible. The officer shook his head in confusion. If this is an empty city, why would they place such a monster right in front of the ruins? Isn't that giant erosion seed used to guard the ruins? The signal soldier didn't reply, and the other soldiers didn't make a sound either. No one could answer the officer's question. In fact, everyone had the same doubt in their hearts. If it was so easy to enter the ruins, wouldn't the sacrifices of those soldiers who had just died on the frontal battlefield be meaningless? But regardless of whether these soldiers believed that the ruins of the ancient bronze city in front of them were really an empty city, the order from the headquarters still had to be carried out. If there is no resistance during the advance, directly attack the interior of the ruins of the ancient bronze city. The 10th Armored Division was only 5 kilometers away from the edge of the ruins of the ancient bronze city. Some of the enhanced soldiers with better eyesight could even clearly see the decorative relief patterns on the buildings. "Stop advancing," the officer raised his arm. "The members of the 2nd Mobile Group will serve as the reconnaissance unit, and the rest will stay on standby." As soon as the order was issued, a reconnaissance team consisting of 6 Biolang high-mobility tactical mechas and 1 Baidu high-power communication mecha drove towards the ruins at full speed, 4 Biolang riding on air cushions carrying a large-caliber fully automatic shotgun. They rushed to the front to clear the way. The other 2 Biolang holding shields were responsible for towing the slower Baidu, following closely behind their teammates. These 7 machines directly entered the main road in a certain sector of the ancient Copper City ruins, and rushed forward 2 kilometers deep along the main road that was nearly 10 meters wide. They did not stop until a crossroads appeared in front of them. The reconnaissance team reported that at a depth of 2.5 kilometers, no enemy traces were found, no resistance was encountered, the ruins themselves showed no signs of activation, and there were no abnormalities. This news was quickly transmitted to the troops on standby in the rear through the high-power communication equipment carried by the Baidu mecha. Not long after, the 10th Armored Division began to continue to advance in the direction of the ruins of the ancient bronze city. The ship also began to slowly sail into the airspace directly above the ruins of the ancient bronze city. "Don't let your guard down, search every room of every building on both sides of the street carefully, and don't let go of any clues." A mammoth tank stood at the front of the team, followed by 3 parallel heavy-duty defense mechas. 3 giant door panel-like shields gathered together to form a slowly advancing shield wall. Further back, they were covered with armor. It has weapons such as rocket launchers, howitzers, and technical laser cannons, and is a fire support mecha that looks like a hedgehog. Behind these armored vehicles are thousands of infantry wearing power armor and tactical exoskeletons. They hold a variety of weapons in their hands and follow closely behind those iron buttocks. Infantry tank coordination, a tactic that was extremely mature 1,000 years ago and is still extremely practical today, especially in this kind of street fighting, where heavily armored tanks and mechas can serve as infantry very well. In bunkers in open areas, infantry can help armored vehicles clear out some enemies located in the blind spots of attack, or clear some obstacles that the vehicles cannot clear. Don't miss every building. It doesn't matter if you advance a little slower. We have already entered the ruins and the primary goal has been achieved. Many entrances to the buildings in the ruins of the ancient bronze city are locked, and ruin hunters cannot enter to explore the interior, but the same cannot be said for the army. A high-power laser cutting machine mounted on an armored vehicle can cut in just a few minutes. Open a half-meter thick alloy door, and if the defense facilities are not activated, pure physical anti-theft methods will not be able to stop an organized army from advancing. Is the intelligence wrong? The defense facilities of this ruins don't look like they have been activated at all. The officer in the vanguard muttered in his heart. Although he was not a ruin hunter, as an officer of the Field Corps, he had also having performed combat missions in Duok ruins, he is very clear about the power of the defensive facilities built into the ruins of the Alpha civilization. To put it bluntly, he had already prepared the troops under his command from the beginning. They were not mentally prepared for the entire army to be wiped out at the entrance of the ruins, but now, they came in so arrogantly. Is it possible that the people above are so anxious to assemble the troops because they expect that the heretical sect will not have time to activate the defense facilities of the ruins? As for the supergiant erosion seed on the front battlefield, it is just to delay our pace and buy time for the defense facilities to be activated. A chess piece. The officer looked up at the friendly fleet in the sky with some irritation. He felt that this should be the most correct explanation, but he always felt that something was wrong. If we want to delay time, why aren't there any blocking forces set up in other directions of the ancient Copper City ruins? Not to mention anything else, if you put in a few mutants and use some of the weapons dug out from the ruins of the Alpha civilization, you can delay it for a few minutes, right? But now they were let in so easily, which made the officer feel that this ruins was like a trap. At this moment, a sudden gunshot interrupted his thoughts. The officer hurriedly looked around and saw a soldier at the edge of the queue covering his neck and falling down. His body was twitching continuously, and blood was red. Foam kept pouring out from between his fingers. Enemy sniper. 6-story building at 10 o'clock, second window from the left. Pierre was shot. The bullet penetrated through the gap in the exoskeleton and seemed to have pierced his trachea. Medic. Medic, come here quickly. Surgery must be performed immediately to save him. Raise the shield. The Mecha raises the shield. We need a bulletproof bunker with an inclination angle of at least 45 degrees. The shouts started one after another immediately, but there was no confusion in the formation of the soldiers. These people were veterans who had experienced hundreds of battles, and a mere sniper could not disrupt their formation at all. A heavy defense mecha immediately took a step back and used a giant shield to protect the infantry behind it. 2 medical soldiers quickly passed through the crowd and ran to Pierre, who was shot. A dozen soldiers wearing power armor formed a circle around Pierre, using their bodies to provide the medical soldiers with a safe bunker for surgery. As for the window where the sniper showed his head, the moment after he fired the shot, it was filled with more than a dozen rocket rounds. A dense explosion came from the inside of the building, followed by billowing smoke pouring out of the windows. Even if the sniper retreated into the bunker immediately after shooting, he would never have had time to escape the scope of the explosion. Sayings like "a sniper's enemy can only be another sniper" only apply to small-scale mercenary groups fighting each other. In war, there is always only one best way to deal with snipers. That's fire coverage. Simple, crude, and effective. About 10 seconds after the explosion, 3 corrosive seeds that had not yet completely transformed and still had charred human body parts hanging on their tentacles jumped out of the windows and hit the street heavily. Then it squirmed and rushed towards the 10th Armored Division. Without any orders from the officers, several soldiers specially responsible for dealing with the seeds of corrosion had already jumped over the mechas and tanks and rushed forward. The weapon in their hands is a special steel fork that is more than 5 meters long. The end of the steel fork is fixed on the arm armor of the power armor, and the front end is a pair of movable mechanical claws, which are directly powered by the engine of the power armor. These soldiers worked in groups of 5 and used steel forks to clamp down on the overcoming seeds of corrosion. Although the power of seeds of corrosion was terrifying, the power that soldiers equipped with high-power power armor could unleash should not be underestimated. In a 5-on-1 struggle, these seeds of erosion were immediately frozen in place, unable to move forward any further. At this time, it was the turn of several others to appear with precision shooter rifles. They all wore heavy special helmets on their heads. The eyepieces of this helmet have functions similar to medical fluoroscopy equipment, but military-grade ones are better than medical-grade ones. The power of the weapon is magnified many times. With the help of this thing, they can quickly locate the core in the body of the corrosion seed. One shot can pierce the explosive bomb and the other the active bullet. The 2 shots can directly take away a corrosion seed, simply and neatly. This is the fastest and most ammunition-saving way for the field army to eliminate a small amount of corrosive seeds. Of course, if it is attacked by a large number of corrosive seeds, it can only choose a saturation attack to cut the mess quickly, although the saturation attack it kills faster, but the consumption of active ammunition is also extremely terrifying. The special team here has dealt with the 3 erosion seeds, and the medical soldiers on the other side have also performed emergency surgery on Pierre. The medical soldiers directly slit Pierre's throat, used hemostats to clamp the blood vessels, and then connected him to a simple extracorporeal circulation device. This emergency treatment method may seem crude, but at least it can allow the skin to heal. L was out of danger in time and maintained his vital signs for more than 6 hours. Such injuries can only be treated by a field hospital in the rear or the medical room of a large airship. But it is still in the combat stage, and they cannot let an airship come down to pick up just one soldier, so they can only. It was time for Pierre to lie down in the compartment of the armored vehicle for a while. "Keep moving forward," the officer said. "Pay attention to the commanding heights of various buildings. For suspicious locations, you can directly apply for fire reconnaissance." I don't know why, but after being sniped, his inner uneasiness and doubt seemed to dissipate a lot. In any case, they still encountered a certain degree of resistance, and the ruins of the ancient bronze city were by no means an empty city. P.S. Thanks to Chijiju for the 5,000 starting coins. P.P.S. I haven't slept well these past few days. The day after the bone puncture was done, the anesthesia wore off and there was a dull pain at the puncture point, so I couldn't sleep in the next 2 days. I was waiting for the results in fear and couldn't sleep, but I was thinking about the report yesterday. I finally felt at ease, but I had a toothache in the middle of the night. The pain lasted until 4 in the morning, when I went to find the remaining painkillers and took them. I fell asleep at 5 or 6 in the morning. I am typing words now, and I feel like I will be sick at any time. I can fall asleep with my head down on the keyboard. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen San. Chapter 659. "You two, go check the building where the sniper was hiding just now." The officer pointed at the 2 soldiers and said. "Yes." The 2 immediately walked forward, ran for a short distance, then activated the thruster backpack installed on the back of the exoskeleton, jumped into the air, and flew towards the window of the building. Seeing the 2 people flying straight up, the officer was startled. He suddenly remembered something, but just when he wanted to let the 2 people return to the ground immediately, the 2 people had already gotten into the still dangerous place. Inside the window with thick smoke. The officer finally realized what he had always felt was wrong. Before the battle started, the officers of the participating troops all participated in a brief online combat meeting. The content of the meeting was to roughly share the known information about the ruins of the ancient bronze city. After a moment, the source of this information was the hunters who had explored this ruins back then. There is one content that has been repeatedly emphasized: any vehicle with a height of more than 5 meters is strictly prohibited from entering the city. At the same time, no one is allowed to climb more than 5 meters above the ground outdoors, otherwise the protective light of the ruins will be triggered. Screen. The situation on the frontal battlefield was so shocking that the officer himself had forgotten about it. But now, not only the tanks and mechas with a height of more than 5 meters were safe, but even the 2 scouts who flew directly into the air also unscathed. Above their heads, the Air Force fleet was still advancing slowly and steadily. As for the light curtains described by the ruin hunters in their reports, they had never appeared at all since they entered the ruins. Not only have the defense facilities of this ruins not been activated, but even some of the traps that originally existed seem to have been closed. The 4 big words "please enter the urn" suddenly appeared in the heart of this officer. He immediately called the communications troops and sent these findings and his guesses to the battleship above, and then the high-power communication equipment on the battleship transmitted them back to the general headquarters behind. In less than 5 minutes, he received a reply: "If nothing abnormal, continue to push forward." My guess, the superiors should have taken it into consideration, right? The officer thought, maybe the superiors have already discovered these abnormalities. But no matter what, he must obey the orders of his superiors. No matter how much he felt that something was wrong with this ruins, he could only bite the bullet and continue moving forward with his men. The two scouts who flew into the window came back soon, and they brought back a sniper rifle that had been blown to pieces and two completely disintegrated assault rifles. Both sniper rifles and assault rifles had been retired long ago. An older model, and with many refurbishments and modifications, it is a standard exile-style weapon. The so-called sniper rifle is actually nothing more than a crooked mechanical sight that doesn't even have a standard scale welded onto the body of an old bolt-action rifle. At this distance, being able to hit the gap in the powered exoskeleton with one shot from this weapon was either due to the sniper's good luck or to Pierre's bad luck. "How is Pierre's condition?" the officer asked the medic casually. "It's no serious problem for the time being, but if the number of wounded continues to increase, our spare plasma may not be enough," the medic replied. His worries are not unreasonable. Previously, the attack of the fusion tentacles caused a large number of wounded to the field corps. Now, even the field hospitals in the rear have a huge plasma gap, let alone front-line troops like them. Bang! There was another gunshot, but this time the shooter was a soldier of the 10th Armored Division. A black, crow-like bird creature with 6 pairs of eyes fell to the ground. This kind of 12-eyed crow is familiar to the soldiers of the field corps. It is not something that evolved naturally on Alpha Planet. Aboriginal creatures, but the product of biochemical transformation of Alpha civilization. This 12-eyed crow is also used with a parasitic organ the size of a fingernail. The doctors of the heretical sect will use a crude operation to implant this parasitic organ under the human skull. As long as the operation is performed, if the person does not die from infection or hemorrhage, within a few days, this parasitic organ will penetrate into the human cerebral cortex and connect with the central nervous system. In this way, the person who receives the transplant can not only gain control of the 12-eyed crow, but also share the vision with it. For the heretical sect, these blackbirds are perfect scouts. Not only have no less than due to the performance of electronic drones, the control radius is more than 100 times that of electronic drones. For example, if this 12-eyed crow appears inside the ruins of the ancient bronze city, then its operator can hide in the White Ridge Mountains or even further, and the connection between the two will not appear. No sign of weakening. Just to study the method of information exchange between the 12-eyed crow and parasitic organ transplantation, the Institute established a special experimental group of nearly 30 experts. However, it was not until this experiment that all members of the team were killed in the mimetic infection incident, and the research did not make any substantial progress. Since the 12-eyed crow has appeared here, it means that the heretical sect has been monitoring its own movements. But why haven't they taken any measures? Not to mention anything else, as long as those moving light walls are triggered, the troops attacking the ruins of the ancient bronze city will suffer considerable damage. The reason why the 10th Armored Division arranges several heavy defense mechas every few dozen meters is to guard against these light curtain mechanisms. Once the light curtain appears, the heavy defense mechas can rely on their own energy shields and entities. The giant shield buys time for the infantry to escape, minimizing casualties as much as possible. In addition, a large number of laser cutting machines are also prepared to cut the doors of surrounding buildings and allow soldiers to hide inside the buildings in time. But now, these preparations seem a bit unnecessary. This is like reviewing like crazy the night before the exam and blasting through dozens of high-level math simulation test papers. However, when you enter the examination room and take a look at the paper, you will find that the tests are just addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division in elementary school mathematics. However, if you encounter this kind of thing in the examination room, in addition to making people feel confused, you will feel more secretive and relieved. But now that the problem is on the battlefield, the nature is completely different. Keep the original pace and continue to advance towards the center of the ruins, the officer ordered. If you find any abnormalities, report to me immediately. 6 kilometers away from the ancient Copper City ruins, inside the collapsed tunnel. Kaylan, we just received a message from the mining base, saying that the main force has invaded the interior of the ruins from the left and right wings of the ancient Copper City. Layton suddenly opened the cockpit and shouted excitedly. So fast, Kaylan naturally had a trace of doubt in his heart. Weren't they blocked by the heretical sect? It is said that before entering the ruins of the ancient Bronze City, we did not encounter enemies or hit any traps along the way, and after entering the ruins of the ancient Bronze City, although we encountered sporadic resistance and attacks, the number of enemies there are very few, and the intensity of the battle is also very low. No one from the main force even died after entering the ruins. The resistance in such a large ancient Copper City is not even as good as that of a general exile settlement. What about the fleet? Did the fleet also enter the sky above the ruins? Kaylan asked again. Yes, the fleet has been following up with the ground forces, but they said that the defense facilities of the ruins have not been triggered at all. Layton grabbed the earphones with one hand and supported the edge of the cockpit with the other. Oh, by the way, there is one thing that an officer in the Vanguard specifically mentioned: even if the height is more than 5 meters above the ground outdoors, the top-down landing light curtain will not be triggered. In addition, the total number of troops currently entering the ruins, there are 14 groups with about 20,000 people, and there is not a single sighting report of the bare wall. I think. Layton scratched his head. Could it be that in the past few years, the reserve energy of the ruins defense device has been exhausted, so it can't be activated? Kaylan, what do you think? 33 turned his head and stared at Kaylan and asked. I feel like a trap. Kaylan pondered for half a second and gave the answer. I think so too. 33 nodded immediately. The energy supply method adopted by the core modules of the relics of the Alpha civilization is basically permanent. Even if the energy stored in the crystal is exhausted, it can still use solar energy, geothermal, rock pressure and other methods to replenish it. There is no saying that it is exhausted. I think someone deliberately turned off the defense facilities of the ruins. Empty city plan? Yvonne asked. Probably. In other words, the heretical sect deliberately left no defenses. After all the ARC troops entered the ruins, they activated all the defense facilities at once and trapped hundreds of thousands of people inside the ruins. Layton continued. But will ARC be fooled? Most likely not. 33 said. If I were the commander, after discovering this incident, I would choose to let the Vanguard go straight to the core control area in the center of the ruins. As for most of the follow-up, I would stay outside the ruins, stay still. Anyway, the advance of the Vanguard is very smooth. Just 20,000 people are enough to occupy the entire ruins, so why invest more troops? Then what should we do now? Do we still need to continue digging tunnels? Layton asked. According to 33, even without our surprise troops, the Vanguard can occupy the core control area. Then there's no need to take this risk, right? Dig first, keep moving forward, and then stop when you reach the edge of the ruins. Kaylan thought for a while and said, then, let's see how the people from the heretical sect deal with this situation. As 33 said, after discovering that the resistance inside the ancient Copper City ruins was extremely weak, the commander-in-chief of this battle stopped allowing subsequent troops to enter the ruins. Until this time, the leading troops entering the ruins happened to be its 25,000 people. Although the ruins of the ancient Copper City are considered large among the many ruins on Alpha Planet, compared to the size of the cities on Earth in the old era, they are only a relatively large town at best. With 25,000 soldiers, plus the 3 fleets in the air, are enough to search every corner of the entire ruins within 24 hours. As of 1800 hours in the evening, more than 3 hours had passed since the first army entered the ruins of the ancient Bronze City. The ARC army had been attacked by a total of 34 heretical sects. Each attack was 3 to 5 Although the members of these heretical sects are all containers of the seed of corrosion, the weapons they use in their human form are very crude. Among them, the one with the strongest firepower to block the team is there were a few more RPG rocket launchers of the old era style, but they did not cause any damage to the vanguard. Most of the vanguard troops are heavily armored troops. Even if these rockets hit directly, they will not be able to hurt the soldiers protected by the thick armor, not to mention that the accuracy of these rocket launchers is horribly low, leaving only time for the heretical sect's followers to aim. And extremely short, as soon as these people lean out from their hiding places, they will be targeted by various machine guns and artillery. If the trigger is not pulled within a second, the ensuing rain of bullets and explosives will instantly kill these people. Congregants were torn to pieces. As for the erosion seeds that enter a period of rapid transformation in their bodies after their death, they will be dealt with by a dedicated killing team and will also not pose a threat. Some soldiers have even removed magazines containing active ammunition and replaced them with conventional ammunition. At this moment, a piece of news that felt a little wrong came from outside the ruins. The supergiant erosion seed on the front battlefield crawled out of the ground. Its huge body split directly into two halves. It slowly moved towards the two wings of the bronze city with its wriggling tentacles. Although it is said to be slow, because the size of this supergiant erosion species is so huge, every step it takes is a span of more than 10 kilometers. Not long after, it has appeared outside the city. Within the sight of the troops standing by. It was completely heading for the main force, and even the Commander-in-Chief's flagship, the Pegasus-class assault ship Blue Fortress took the initiative to attack as a bait, and it completely ignored it. Withstanding the indiscriminate bombardment of the Blue Fortress, they crawled toward the troops staying outside the city. With the terrifying destructive power of the supergiant erosion seed, it would not take much time to massacre these tens of thousands of people. Not long after, the troops on standby outside the city received the latest order: enter all of them into the ruins of the ancient bronze city, luring the supergiant erosion seeds to attack the ruins. But what no one expected was that as soon as the two troops entered the ruins of the ancient bronze city, the supergiant erosion seed suddenly turned around and used its tentacles to pull down the Blue Fortress that was chasing behind it. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chenmi-san. Chapter 660. Caught off guard, the Blue Fortress failed to dodge this swift and precise attack. The energy shield that was hastily opened was instantly penetrated. The entire battleship disintegrated in the air, and the disintegrated hull fragments were enveloped in a thick smoke and explosions fell from the sky like a rain of fire. Fortunately, the command headquarters on the Blue Fortress has been transferred in advance, and this flagship is actually just an empty shell in name only. After Kaylan learned the news, his first reaction was, the goal of the supergiant erosion seed is to drive the troops who were on standby into the ruins. In other words, the ruins of the ancient Copper City were a trap specially set for them. This was almost a certainty. But, if the heretic sect wanted to let these troops enter the ruins, they wouldn't have to deploy this corrosive seed on the frontal battlefield from the beginning. Layton asked puzzledly, isn't this approach superfluous? What if the field army didn't have it? Should we choose to take a roundabout route instead of retreating? Perhaps for them, there is no retreat option. 33 said, I think the biggest doubt about this matter is, why the undead crew member you are talking about is so eager to launch this war. Can I communicate directly with the people of the Undead Crew Association? Yvonne looked at Kaylan with questioning eyes. Let me try. Kaylan took out his mobile phone, but at this time, there was no signal in the signal bar next to the battery icon in the upper right corner of the screen. There were only a few lines of small words that kept flashing. This machine is currently no longer in the service area. Layton, help me connect my mobile phone to the command network for this battle, Kaylan said. Wait a moment, Layton said, and started to get busy. In less than a minute, a simple signal transceiver composed of several metal antennas and a chip appeared in his hand. This thing is equivalent to a wireless router, which can connect to standard communication equipment within 10 meters of the surrounding area. This saves Kaylan the trouble of running into the cockpit of the Mecha to make calls. Ian's mobile phone was connected to the military network of this combat operation. The mining base and the communication tower built in the White Ridge Mountains were used as transfer base stations, directly connected to ARC's public communication network. Kaylan originally wanted to call Pan directly to ask for details, but when he saw that the information dealer with the IDX 0420 on his social software happened to be online, he suddenly had a strange idea in his heart. As if by mistake, Kaylan edited a message and sent it to the information dealer. Do you know the news about the 3 major fleets of the Field Corps and the Air Force besieging the ruins of the ancient Bronze City? I know. Almost as soon as Kaylan pressed the send button, the other party gave a reply. Considering the delay in the network signal transmission process, Kaylan even suspected that the other party sent this answer at the same time that he had raised it. Before the question. This guy feels like a ghost lurking on the internet. This time the information dealer's answer was very brief, without any delay or emoticons. It was not at all like his previous style. Could this guy have been snatched away? Kaylan complained in his mind, then edited another message and sent it. Do you know why the people above are so eager to attack? I know, he replied instantly. What's the price of this information? Kaylan asked habitually. Although he knew very little about this information dealer, he was still aware of the characteristic of no profit, no early start, and the other party also said it during the chat. I laughed at myself for not having any special hobbies except money. It's free this time. The information dealer's answer surprised Kaylan. The reason why the undead crew members are rushing to launch an attack is because this is a decisive battle between ARC and the heretical section. I can tell you clearly, the Prophet's true body is within the ruins of the ancient Bronze City. Seeing these lines of words displayed on the screen, Ian's breath couldn't help but suffocate. The next second, his fingers quickly tapped on the virtual keyboard. Where did you get this information? Kaylan was not too surprised when the intelligence dealer mentioned the Immortal Crew Association, although the existence of the Immortal Crew Association is regarded as the highest level secret of ARC, compared with the information this guy can get. On the contrary, it seems a bit commonplace. Have you forgotten the rules? When buying information from me, you are not allowed to inquire about the source, even if it is free information. Okay, Kaylan thought for a while and changed the question. Are you a member of the undead crew? This time, the other party didn't reply immediately. Kaylan waited for a full minute before getting an ambiguous answer. You can say yes, you can say no. Can the Riddler crawl? I don't want to be the Riddler, but that's the fact. If you insist on having an accurate answer, then just pretend that I am, the information dealer replied. What does it mean to pretend that you are? Kaylan frowned and subconsciously asked a useless question. Why did you never say it? It wasn't until he sent this message that he realized that he seemed to be asking nonsense. Because you never asked. The other party's answer was as meaningless as Ian's question. Then which member are you? What's your code name? I don't have a seat or a code name. If you have to think that people with a serial number are considered members of the Immortal Crew Association, then under this premise, I am not a member of the Immortal Crew Association. Under what conditions can you be considered a member of the Crew Association? When calculated according to authority, the other party replied. For example, regarding the delivery of the living armor to you, those named guys have the right to vote, and I also have my vote. Of course, in most cases, I will abstain from voting. I prefer to be an observer rather than a participant in the event. Do the other members of the undead crew know about your existence? Some know, some don't. Another ambiguous answer. you should know that the information resources among the members of the Immortal Crew Association are not completely equal. Just like ordinary people, everyone has their own "it's my own little secret," and I exist in the secret of some of them. Okay, let's not talk about it for now. Now that you said it, this is a decisive battle between the heretic sect and Ark, but now it's clear that the other party deliberately put Ark's main force into the ruins. This is no longer a conspiracy. Is a naked conspiracy, it just has the words "this is a trap" written on your face. Aren't you still planning to suspend a combat operation? How to stop it? Let the troops withdraw from the ruins, and then face the monster guarding outside. Can't we just let the airship transport people out? With the capacity of the combat fleet, it will take at least 4 days to transport these hundreds of thousands of people. Do you think it will be in time? X0420 asked. Then you just watch these hundreds of thousands of people buried in the ruins. If this was a face-to-face conversation, Kaylan even wanted to grab the other party's collar and question him. This is what the field corps can do. The main force mobilized is a group of warriors with the most combat experience among humans. If they all die here, who else can compete with the monster army of the heretical sect in the future? But as long as the heretical sect can be eradicated in one fell swoop, then their sacrifice will be completely worth it. The intelligence dealer replied, have you ever heard of an idiom called taking advantage of the enemy's strategy? Do you know the heretical sect's plan? I don't know. If I knew, I would definitely not let this combat plan be implemented. But since things are irreversible, we can only resort to tricks. What kind of tricks do you know how to use? Assault the control core of the ancient Copper City ruins and occupy the central tower. Since the heretical sect has set the ancient Copper City ruins as a trap, then for this trap to be effective, it must be related to the ruins themselves. If you can successfully seize the ruins with control, all problems will naturally be solved. Us? Yes, you. The intelligence dealer sent a smiley expression. As a special operations team, this is your top priority. As for the hundreds of thousands of troops, they are just to attract firepower for you. Last question, what's your relationship with Penn? Kaylan asked. He always felt that in terms of being mean, this information dealer was on par with Penn. If he hadn't said that he didn't have a seat or a code name, Kaylan would have wanted both. I thought it was one of Penn's vests. Penn knows about my existence. He likes to imitate my way of talking and acting, that's all the other person said. So, your qualifications are older than Penn's. The qualifications Kaylan mentioned here did not refer to the order of seats in the Undead Crew Club, but to the time when he joined the Undead Crew Club. He had already, the seat number actually doesn't have much meaning, otherwise, the Pope of Chiron's 5th seat would never be able to inherit it. I guess I joined 200 or 300 years earlier than him, the information dealer said lightly. How much information can you tell me about the Undead Crew Association? This part of the information is not for sale and needs to be unlocked by completing various tasks, and depending on the degree of completion of the tasks, the unlocked information will be different, the intelligence dealer said. Where are you going to play the main RPG? I don't have any objection to how you want to understand it. But your main mission right now is to take down the high tower located in the middle of the ruins of the ancient Bronze City. I can basically confirm that the Prophet's true body is hiding in this high tower. How are you sure? Because if he wants to completely control the ruins of an alpha civilization, only his true body can do it. Just like Yagunactor, he once tried to use a substitute to activate the console, but ultimately failed. So, I am the only one who can seize control of the ruins from the Prophet, right? Kaylan quickly saw another layer of meaning hidden between the lines of the other party's words. Yes, so your small team is the key to this battle. The hundreds of thousands of troops above are just a foil. What's going on, Kaylan? Layton poked his head out of the cockpit. You didn't call anyone from the Undead Crew Club. Instead, you used social software to chat with people? You have to know how to use a military network to log into civilian social software. This is illegal, and if someone finds out, they may immediately cut off our network. I'm communicating with a guy who claims to be a member of the Immortal Crew Association, Kaylan said. Claims to be? So is he real or fake? I can't be sure, but judging from the information he provided me, his identity is very likely to be true, Kaylan said. I have conducted many transactions with him. Before his identity was revealed to me, I always felt that there were many unexplainable doubts about him. But if he is really a member of the Immortal Crew Club, then these doubts will be explained. But if he is an enemy, it would be terrible, 33 added. Then what should we do now? Withdraw from the war zone, Layton asked again. We have to hurry up and make a decision. I always feel that if we run too late, we might not be able to escape. No, we can't withdraw. Kaylan looked up at the blasphemer mecha. Valentina, turn on the machine's engine power to the maximum. We must enter the core control of the ancient Bronze City ruins as quickly as possible. District. No way. Hearing what Kaylan said, Layton was stunned for a moment. We all know that the ruins of the Bronze City are a trap. Why do we still jump in? Mr. Ghost Owl's previous analogy is correct. The Bronze City can indeed be regarded as a large formation that can kill people, but the more complex this kind of formation is, the less likely it is to be perfect. As long as the formation I can be found, it can be cracked, and the formation of the ancient Copper City ruins is on the central tower of the core control area, Kaylan said. If we retreat now, then the hundreds of thousands of field troops who entered the ruins will be able to crack it. It's really all in vain. With so much vitality lost, the strength gap between ARC and the heretical sect will only become more and more obvious. When the nest is overturned, there are no eggs left, Yvonne said softly. The core control area that cannot be conquered by hundreds of thousands of people can be conquered by just a few more of us, Layton said with a grimace. I admit that in this team, except for me, you are all great people. Each one is stronger than the other, but no matter how strong a person is, there is a limit. Can we accomplish what hundreds of thousands of people cannot accomplish? What we need is not power, but a key. Kaylan looked around the team, paused, and then said in a deep voice, I am the key. P.S. Thanks to the reading giraffe, soap is of great use. Anya 55 for the reward of 1,500 starting coins. Thank you for the 100 starting coins for the reward of Flicker of Nirvana Alien Relic Hunter author, and Chenmi-san. Chapter 661. With plug-in equipment like the Blasphemer Mecha, Kaylan and the others quickly dug right under the ruins of the ancient Bronze City. However, it was not until they arrived at their destination that they discovered that there were also a large number of copper alloy mechanical modules buried deep underground in the ruins of the ancient Copper City. The average burial depth of these mechanical modules was about 200 to 300 meters. As for although the maximum depth cannot be detected with the equipment of the Special Operations Team, it is conservatively estimated to be at least 1,000 meters. The ruins of the ancient Copper City above the surface are just the tip of the iceberg exposed above the sea. The underground part occupies at least more than 80% of the entire ruins. But thinking about it, if you want the various sectors on the surface to be able to change positions freely, you must need a huge mechanical system as support. Unfortunately, with the level of Layton and Valentina, they are completely unable to see this. What are the uses and principles of each mechanical module? As for the other people in the team, they know nothing about machinery. On the contrary, Ziluo made some discoveries. She told Kaylan that these mechanical modules have a common feature, that is, there are a large number of energy amplification devices inside. This so-called energy amplification device is similar to Yaguna. The functional array in Thor's core power chamber has the same purpose. It uses the principle of resonance to amplify the energy released from the energy crystal. This increase does not require additional fuel. Similar physical experiments have been done many times by humans, and the experimental results without exception prove that the energy generated by resonance is increased out of thin air and does not come from the reaction process of any substance. Although scholars on the ark have not yet figured out how resonance deceives the law of energy conservation, they have already applied it in practice, such as the crystal energy bombs configured by the ark military, and those on large battleships. All the resonant reactors it carries are applications of this unknown principle. This is like the ancients of thousands of years BC in the old era. They had no idea what changes would occur at the atomic level when different metal elements were fused, but they knew that adding tin to copper could smelt a substance called bronze is a material that is not only easier to process, but also has more stable chemical properties and higher physical strength than copper. Of course, ancient people did not know the concepts of chemical properties and physical strength. In their eyes, bronze was less likely to rust than copper, and it was also more wear-resistant, sharper, and not easy to break. Compared with copper, bronze is an excellent material for making weapons and tools. Human history has since entered the famous Bronze Age. The current humans on the ark are actually not much different from the ancient people thousands of years ago in their application of the technologies left behind by the Alpha civilization. The materials of these mechanical modules are the same as those on the surface of the ancient Bronze City ruins. They are very hard and extremely difficult to excavate. Fortunately, there are gaps between the modules. Kaylan and the others followed these gaps and headed all the way. He dug into the center of the ruins. They dug until they reached the junction of the outer ring and the middle ring, and were blocked by an underground metal wall whose thickness was completely undetectable. The plan to directly enter the core control area from the underground went bankrupt in front of this metal wall. Kaylan and the others could only choose to dig upward. When the blasphemer Mecha lifted off a heavy copper alloy floor tile and climbed to the surface, it happened to hit the 10th Armored Division that was advancing towards the central ring. Hundreds of guns and the 240mm twin main guns on the mammoth tanks were all aimed at Kaylan and the others, and several defensive mechas instantly activated their energy shields. No shooting. No one is allowed to shoot. After seeing clearly the attire of Kaylan and others, the officer immediately shouted, "They are one of our own. We are a special operations team responsible for infiltrating the core area, but the underground tunnel is blocked by a metal wall, so we have to come up," Kaylan briefly explained to the other party. "We are the 1st Regiment of the 10th Armored Division, and we are marching towards the central ring of the ruins," the officer said. "The task we received is to attack the core control area of the ruins while covering you. However, we encountered many obstacles along the way. The resistance was so weak that it was almost negligible." "I already know," Kaylan sighed. "This ancient bronze city is probably a trap specially prepared for us." When he heard Kaylan mention the word trap, the expressions of the surrounding soldiers more or less changed. Only the officer who spoke still maintained his original expression. It seems that the officer should have guessed this. "I originally thought that even if this ruins were a trap, the only ones who would be sacrificed would be my vanguard troops, but not long ago, even the main troops waiting outside the ruins were forced in by that monster. Now there is no way out. The only way is to capture the core control area in the center of the ruins before the trap is launched," the officer said to Kaylan. The new order they received was basically the same solution as the intelligence dealer said. "I was still wondering before, if the heretic sect wanted us to fall into a trap, why would they set up such a monster on the frontal battlefield? Now I understand," Layton said from the side. "It seems that they have expected the ark. The commander will choose to divide his troops. That monster is not used to block the advance of the large army, but to drive all the troops staying outside the ruins into the inside of the ruins. If the old dog were here, he would definitely compliment you by saying, 'You have a bright mind,'" Yvonne said casually. "How can this be considered a compliment?" Layton showed a wry smile and maneuvered Augustus to turn around in a small half-circle, heading towards the core area in the center of the ruins. "It seems that we can only bite the bullet and go in. Rushed. No, taking the land route is too slow," Kaylan suddenly said. Since the air defense facilities at the ancient Bronze City ruins have not been activated, can we have the warship directly send a few of us to the core control area? Although the Air Force fleet does not have the ability to bring all the troops out of the ruins, if they only want to send a few people in, there should be no problem. Are there just a few of you? The officer was stunned for a moment. In his understanding, although the combat effectiveness of the infiltration team must be higher than that of ordinary soldiers, their number is too small. As a surprise force, they may still be able to effective, but when they merged with the large army, they would be nothing more than a few super soldiers at best. He would never believe that a few super soldiers could change the direction of a war. Our team has carried secret equipment that can seize control of the ruins. Time was running out. Kaylan had no time to waste words with the other party, so he simply moved the undead crew members out. This is an order from the superior, the superior of the general headquarters. You should know that, right? The officer looked startled. With his rank, although he was not aware of the existence of the Undead Crew Association, the decision-making level above the general headquarters naturally refers to the military headquarters and the Joint Parliamentary Group. In the eyes of ordinary people, they are the most powerful group of people in the entire arc. It is very rare for the military headquarters and the Joint Parliamentary Group to directly bypass the general headquarters of this operation and issue orders to the combat troops. However, if what Kaylan said is true, it only shows that the task they received is extremely important. It is so important that even the main force needs to take the initiative to cooperate with them to complete this task. I need to test. Before the word certificate of verification was uttered, the radio communication equipment carried by the officer rang. As soon as he pressed the answer button, he heard the voice of his immediate superior, the commander of the 10th Armored Division. I just received the order to go up to the peak and unconditionally meet the requirements of the Special Operations Team. No matter what they say, do as they say. Yes. The officer couldn't help but look at Kaylan and the others, and finally set his sights on the tall blasphemer Mecha. In his opinion, the secret equipment mentioned by Kaylan and others was most likely this strange machine he had never heard of. He would never have thought that the so-called secret equipment was Kaylan himself. Actually, the raid plan you mentioned was proposed as early as when we entered the ruins, the officer sighed. However, the core control area is the only area in the entire ancient Bronze City ruins where defense facilities have been activated. Any aircraft entering the airspace in the core control area will be shot down by powerful laser beams. Even airdrop troops can only be airdropped in the peripheral areas of the core control area. In the previous half hour, there have been 6 batches, totaling about 1,000. Multiple Marines were dropped on the outside of the core control area. Then have they penetrated the core control area? Layton asked. The officer nodded first, then shook his head. These 6 batches of Marines all lost contact shortly after entering the core control area. Are there any sounds of fighting in the core control area? 33 also asked, for example, gunshots or explosions. The officer continued to shake his head. There was no sound coming from inside. It was as if they had disappeared from the world. Tisk, it sounds really scary. Layton smacked his lips. I was originally worried that the ruins air defense system would suddenly activate and knock me down when I was airborne, but now it seems that after landing, this is hell. If you insist on going, the officer pointed to a light frigate flying over their heads in the sky. The cross pickaxe will drop the 7th batch of mobile troops into the core control area in 10 minutes. On the south side, you can move with them. Okay, Kaylan nodded. We will parachute down with this group of troops. The 7th batch of airdrop mobile troops also came from the 10th Armored Division, but compared to the group of people Kaylan and the others encountered on the ground, the equipment of this mobile unit was obviously much better. Not only were all members equipped with full coverage type of powered armor, tactical mechas account for more than 20% of the total number of members in the team. That is to say, every 5-person team can be assigned at least one mecha. The mobile force has a total of 75 people, including 10 pusher tactical mechas, 4 Wolf Spiders, 2 Shield Mountains and 1 Baidu, plus 4 high-mobility light armored vehicles and AA 175mm caliber self-propelled artillery. This level of firepower configuration is enough to wipe out a 2,000-person exile settlement within 3 minutes. But according to the commander of this mobile force, the 6 airborne troops that had previously entered the core control area were almost all configured in this way. However, the people outside did not even hear a sound of artillery, and they lost it. Connection. The morale of the soldiers in the mobile unit was obviously a little low. Some of them closed down and fell asleep with their backs against their bodies, some were holding tablets and writing suicide notes, while those in the guard were clenching their hands tightly. The gun inside bowed his head and said nothing. For them, this is almost a fatal mission. Although it is unlucky to write a suicide note before a war. The commander of the mobile unit glanced at the soldiers and shrugged helplessly at Kaylan and the others. It's not a big problem. I write a suicide note before every mission. Layton showed a somewhat silly smile, although I don't seem to have anyone or anything to entrust. If I die, Natasha will help me deal with the rest of the matter, Yvonne said. Actually, I have died once a long time ago, so there is nothing to care about. I haven't written anything like this since I retired, 33 whispered. When I was in the army, I wrote enough. The Cross Pickaxe frigate maintained a stable cruising speed and slowly advanced. At this distance, Kaylan and the others could already see the copper-colored tower standing in the distance through the portholes. That is, the core tower in the center of the ruins is also where the core control hub of the ruins is located. The tower is almost 2,000 meters high, with a base diameter of about 100 meters. Its general shape is a hexagonal cone. There are no windows or any decorative patterns on the tower. It is as smooth as a mirror, from a distance. Go, like a polished hexagonal copper column. Judging from the appearance of the tower, the building materials used in this tower are the same as other parts of the Bronze City, but this is only limited to the appearance, and the inner structure is unknown. Surrounding the tower are a large number of warships from the Ark fleet. These warships continue to bombard the tower with various weapons. However, the attacks of energy weapons are absorbed by the shield covering the core tower. As for physical attacks such as missiles and artillery shells, they were intercepted and shot down by the high power beam mentioned by the officer before as soon as they entered the airspace of the core control area. Dozens of warships were firing on all cylinders, but they were unable to cause any damage to the tower.